After absorbing the abilities of 36 mutants, the real mastermind behind the zombie tide, Yuan Konga, also reached the infamous level 5 Epsilon superhuman. However, this level of unimaginable power was achieved with her secret finally exposed, making her and the entire snow worship sect the enemy of all the other major forces in Tianhai City, the investigation team and the Jiangnan region by extension. As the group reached the entrance of the abandoned building, the mutant guard in front of the building immediately raised his hand and told them to stop. Everyone, this is a restricted place of the snow worship sect. You are not allowed to. Before he could finish speaking, Kong Shang appeared in front of him like a ghost, grabbed his neck and squeezed slightly. Don't make noise. The guy rolled his eyes and seconds after, he passed out. Zhang Yi and the rest walked straight inside the abandoned building. The abandoned building was still full of bloody brilliance, and the branches and vines of the blood vines were crawling all over the corners. However, since they came during the day, the scene in front of them was clearer and more shocking but expected. At this time, there were more corpses hanging on the ceiling and walls. After all, nearly 10,000 people died in the recent battle at this camp. So all those corpses had become the best nutrients for the blood vines. There was also a gloomy and weird atmosphere everywhere. Even if it was not the first time, some people still felt creeped out as a chill went down their spine. The dead are not scary, but what is scary is this weird and ominous scene that is almost like a religious ceremony. Xiao Honglian couldn't help asking Zhang Yi, "Where is the evidence you mentioned?" Actually, during their time there, Xiao Honglian also secretly took away the things hanging on the wall and studied them, but later found out that they were just ordinary shriveled corpses, drained of all nutrients. Therefore, they were not the root cause of the zombie tide. Zhang Yi turned slightly and said with a serious expression, "At the beginning, I also had doubts. We studied these corpses and the branches and leaves of this blood vine, and found nothing similar to the zombie virus." He glanced at everyone. "But I soon realized that they deliberately let us know. At least you have all secretly spied here, haven't you? If there is really a big secret, they can't be so lax in defense. Think about it. Do you think that a place where we can come and go freely is really as simple as it seems?" Everyone looked at each other and tacitly moved their eyes away. That's right, they took the opportunity to help defend the sect and sneaked in here and took samples for research. Everyone soon came to the main body of the blood vine. The huge blood-red plant like a world tree stood upright, rooted deep in the earth, and the top of the abandoned building was above its head. Then, the branches and leaves spread from the ceiling of the highest floor, covering every space in the building. Zhang Yi continued lightly. "Zombies like to live in dark and humid underground. This is the preference of the viruses that live in their bodies. So it can be concluded that the breeding environment of this virus must be the same. And in the entire Tianhai City, the scientific research sites that meet such an environment have long disappeared. Then, there is only this place." Zhang Yi pointed to the underground where the blood vine roots were, and his eyes became sharp in an instant. This was his guess, but after combining various fragmented clues, this guess has become a realistic idea recently. And he came here this time to verify this idea. After hearing what Zhang Yi said, everyone couldn't help but look at the location of the blood vine's roots. Bailey Chongqing frowned, stepped forward, and then punched the ground fiercely. With a dull bang, the ground was instantly broken, and large pieces of cement and soil flew everywhere, swept in all directions by Bailey Chongqing's fist wind. Zhang Yi and his team couldn't help but take a few steps back, using various methods to avoid the flying soil and rocks. Soon, when the dust settled, everyone hurried forward to observe whether Zhang Yi's so-called evidence appeared. The next moment, everyone's eyes widened, and there was an extremely shocked look in their pupils, and there was a hint of fear surging. The roots of the blood vine, densely packed roots, have been spreading, and it is unknown how much land has been covered. And at the end of these roots, fruits are produced like peanuts. The fruit is surprisingly one corpse after another. Humanoid corpses covered with white hair, and huge, bronze corpses. Some have almost completed the transformation, while others are still in the process of transformation, still retaining the appearance of their former human bodies. Everyone was familiar with them. Aren't they the corpse kings and bronze-armored corpses that they had fought before? Unexpectedly, they all grew from the same tree. No, to be exact, they were cultivated, because it is clear that some of them still retain human characteristics and are transforming into zombies. So the root of the disaster is here. These snow-worshipping cult, you damn bastards. After understanding the truth, Xiao Honglian clenched her teeth and roared angrily. Not only her, but everyone present was filled with anger. If this was a natural disaster, it would be fine, they could only bear it. But this is a man-made disaster, and it is a long-planned, despicable and shameless man-made disaster. Since the end of the world, the snow worship sect has suffered the most casualties. Yuan Konga and Zhang Yi used the sacrifices of ordinary people to gain the trust and sympathy of other forces. At this time, everyone who understood everything felt that they were being played around by the snow worship sect, like a group of fools. If Zhang Yi had not exposed this conspiracy in time, what would the consequences be? Just thinking about it is enough to make everyone feel cold. It was at this moment that the other leaders of the various forces knew that once the investigation team left Tianhai City, Yuan Konga and Zhang Yi will reveal their true faces and then eliminate them in one fell swoop. The thought of being targeted by a giant python was not a pleasant feeling. Despicable and shameless villains. There are people in this world who can be so cruel that they even plot against their own people. Although no one in the investigation team spoke, their faces were terribly gloomy. The death of Bian Junwu was a huge pain for them, now that they happen to find out that the person who killed their captain has always been by their side. They also can't stand the feeling of being fooled. Bailey Chongqing slowly raised his head, squinted his eyes, and had a weird smile on his face. Suddenly he opened his mouth, showing his white teeth as he continued to smile. These guys really set up a big game and fooled us all, but I don't like to be fooled by others. None of us do. I'm going to kill them. We're going to kill all those bastards. The fierce killing intent began to spread around. After everyone present knew the truth, they all wanted to kill the people of the snow worship sect. Some people did it for their comrades, some for their families and friends, and some purely for the loss of their own forces. In short, now they have a common goal, which is to kill the person who played everyone. Although justified, everyone, with the exception of Zhang Yi, were seething with uncontrolled rage. They were all blinded with it to the point that it was not certain whether they were going to wipe out everyone. But one thing was for sure, and thus the snow worship sect would cease to exist when they were done. Zhang Yi looked at the murderous crowd and didn't say anything, but there was a gleam of light in his eyes, and he had a deeper plan in his mind. How strong is Yuan Konga, who has absorbed so many mutants' abilities that no one can estimate? Zhang Yi knows that she is very strong, but she is definitely not strong enough to ignore other mutants. And if that's the case, she would not have to look at the face of the Jiangnan region. Also, what about after getting Bian Junwu's ability? How high will her threat index be? Everyone's anger value is maxed out, so no matter how strong Yuan Konga is, we all have a chance to test her. Let's wait and see, Zhang Yi said to himself. Bailey Chongqing carried his huge knight's lance and turned to walk outside. When he passed by the explosives expert Yi Jikong, he gave him a deep look. Old Yi, destroy this plant. Such a root of evil cannot be left. In fact, make sure nothing is left standing. Yi Jikong nodded that he understood. Leave it to me, he replied. The blood vine is the real mother of zombies. Only by destroying it can the zombie tide in Tianhai City disappear completely. Bailey Chongqing strode out of the abandoned building with high spirits, and the other members of the investigation team followed him. The people from several major forces followed them without any hesitation. Now everyone does not need to communicate with words about what to do. The culprit who caused Tianhai City to be almost destroyed must die. Zhang Yi also followed behind everyone silently. Before leaving, he looked back at Yi Jikong. Yi Jikong walked up to the blood vine and stretched out his hand to press on it. A golden light flashed by, and a strange black thing with an octopus-like shape appeared on the blood vine. A person with the ability to release energy. It seems that he has the ability to condense energy and turn it into explosives that can explode at a fixed time. Zhang Yi didn't look at it for long. Staring at other people's superpower research can easily give people an offensive feeling. He just committed Yi Jikong's ability to memory, and then followed Bailey Chongqing and the others out. Not long after, a violent explosion suddenly sounded in the building. Then, the entire abandoned building collapsed. Yi Jikong walked out of the smoke of the explosion with a calm face. At this time, the remaining followers of the sect were startled by the loud noise and appeared outside. They watched the abandoned building slowly collapse, and then looked at Bailey Chongqing and other murderous people, and they were afraid to step forward. Bailey Chongqing didn't even look at them, carrying the knight's lance and walked towards St. John's Cathedral. Some of the believers saw this scene and mustered up the courage to step forward to stop them. If you want to see the leader, you must notify us first. Immediately after, a huge black shadow flashed in the air, and the bodies of those people turned into a residual shadow in the air and disappeared instantly. Zhang Yi only saw a large group of blood mist erupting in the air. Bailey Chongqing's speed of attack was so fast that even he couldn't see it clearly. But a few seconds later, a sound of breaking came from the wall of a building hundreds of meters away. From a distance, two huge pools of blood appeared on the wall. It was like a mosquito being slapped to death on the wall. Liang Yu stared at Bailey Chongqing's back and cautiously reminded Zhang Yi. This man is so strong. He's equivalent to at least 3 Ling Fongs, or even higher. In the past, in the eyes of Zhang Yi and others, Ling Fong was synonymous with a perfect warrior, because his speed, strength, and agility were all maxed out. But this was the first time they saw a powerful warrior who could completely surpass Ling Fong in the field of strengthening. When all the truth has been revealed, a war is absolutely inevitable. Both sides have lost something very important. Precious people, precious resources. These things are worth their lives. Or in Zhang Yi's case, fighting in order to be left alone to enjoy a peaceful life. Separated by a gate, the atmosphere between the two sides has been tense like a bowstring that will break at the touch. Zhang Yi's eyes were fixed on the interior of the church. A few distance away, only a few combatants and the most devout believers gathered nearby out of curiosity. But most of the believers who had no fighting power huddled in their houses nervously, like ostriches, not daring to see what happened. Among them was Li Jian and his wife. "Son, are you watching this? Your dad has avenged you, because today the lunatic Yuan Konga is going to die." Li Jian said this with a crazy look in his eyes. Led by Bailey Chongqing, Xiao Honglian, Xing Tian, Zhang Yi, and the rest. A total of more than 30 mutants gathered here. They stared at the black gate decorated with sacred patterns, but no one rushed in rashly. Wu Di took a step forward, and a huge ball of light appeared all over his body. Then, like a sharp sword, the floating cannon blasted towards the door of the church. In a flash, a loud boom ranged out, and with that, the door of the church was shattered. The moment the door was broken, the group saw the scene inside. In front of the altar, Yuan Konga was sitting on the steps, holding the dead Jing Yixin in her arms. After seeing Yuan Konga, Wu Di's eyes burst into strong hatred. To him, Bian Junwu was like a father. And once Bian Junwu died, he would blame anyone who caused this result. Of course, the one he hated the most was the leader of the snow worship sect. "Go to hell," Wu Di loudly declared. He stood in the front, and hundreds of light balls appeared around him at the same time, reflecting him like a god. The dense floating cannons shot out like a storm, carrying the terrifying power to destroy everything. At this time, Yuan Konga finally raised her head and looked at them, and her eyes were as cold as an iceberg that had not melted for millions of years. A strong hatred radiated from her. Yuan Konga was absolutely pissed at this moment, and this was because the last person in this world she could trust was dead. When Wu Di's floating cannon approached her, Yuan Konga placed Zhang Yixin's body on the ground and slowly stood up. Then, within 10 meters of her, an invisible barrier suddenly appeared, and all the floating cannon were blocked by this invisible force. The powerful floating cannon almost destroyed the church, but it could not cross her telekinesis wall. Zhang Yi reminded everyone. "She has at least dozens of superpowers. Everyone should be careful." Xiao Honglian's eyes were filled with murderous intent. "No matter how powerful she is, I don't believe that the power of all the mutants in Tianhai City can't kill her." Her whole body had long been covered with red flames, and dark red lines like magma flowed on the surface of her skin. She quickly ran in another direction and spit out a huge fire dragon towards Yuan Konga. No one needs to be ordered deliberately. The mutants present here are the elite among the elites who can survive until now and know how to fight and cooperate. The crowd divided into 3 directions and used long-range attack abilities to attack Yuan Konga. The melee-type enhancement and orc ability users were ready to wait for Yuan Konga to show an opening and rush up to give her a fatal blow. All kinds of superpowers flew towards Yuan Konga like a torrential rain. However, no matter what kind of attack she faced, Yuan Konga's face remained unchanged. There seemed to be a spherical field outside her body, which could block any attack. In Zhang Yi's eyes, white light was flickering. He really wanted to know whether his divine power could break through Yuan Konga's mental barrier. But this is his trump card, which cannot be used easily. He must wait until the right opportunity appears. But at this moment, Yuan Konga's body suddenly floated slowly into the air. She looked down at everyone from above like a god descending to the world. The believers of the sect in the distance saw this scene, and they immediately started to praise their leader excitedly, shouting the name of Snow God over and over and over again. They believed that what they were witnessing was the blessing of the Snow God. And currently, their leader had finally been worthy of being the human body of the Snow God. But Yuan Konga was using Zhang Yixin's ability at that moment, and Zhang Yi noticed. Zhang Yixin's telekinesis is very powerful. The most enviable thing is that he can control his body and get rid of the control of gravity to achieve high-speed flight. However, now this ability has appeared in Yuan Konga. The so-called Ice Soul was completely a huge trap to cut leaks. So, Yuan Konga's great mercy in granting anyone the opportunity to awaken their superpowers was all a lie. and now it was on display. However, it seems none of the believers present seemed to notice. At this moment, Yuan Konga, suspended in midair, looked down at all living beings like a god. She remained motionless despite all kinds of superpowers attacking her. Wu Di simply couldn't believe his eyes. His floating gun was more powerful than a sniper rifle, and even close to the power of a real rocket launcher. But why was Yuan Konga able to take on so many floating cannons so easily? Zhang Yi realized that something was wrong and quietly retreated behind everyone. Yuan Konga looked at them and said coldly, "Foolish and insignificant people, you don't understand what kind of existence you are fighting against. I am the apostle of God in the world, the messenger who exercises divine power. All acts of blasphemy against divine authority must be punished by heaven." After she said that, she suddenly opened her arms slowly. "Let me cleanse this world without faith." As her arms began to rise, the ground under the feet of everyone suddenly began to tremble violently. Zhang Yi and the others were unstable and almost fell to the ground. Cracks appeared on the ground, like an earthquake. In Zhang Yi's surprised eyes, the ground began to float up. Zhang Yi had already turned on the eightfold speed, and his figure retreated like a ghost. Others also felt something was wrong and moved away from Yuan Konga's position. However, all the surrounding buildings were collapsing, the ground was breaking, and huge rocks rose into the air, like meteorites all over the sky. Such a powerful ability made the pupils of every mutant present shrink. They knew that Yuan Konga was very strong, but they didn't expect her to be this strong. They had seen this kind of world-destroying power an hour ago. Unexpectedly, they're seeing it again so soon. A level 5 powerhouse. The power of the Epsilon-level mutant. After absorbing the abilities of Bian Junwu and Zheng Yixian, Yuan Konga successfully broke through to this level. Yuan Konga looked at everyone with cold eyes and pressed down hard with her right hand. The huge rocks in the sky smashed towards the people on the ground like meteors. Countless boulders rose high into the sky and then quickly fell to the ground in the horrified eyes of the crowd. Within a radius of several kilometers, this was an indiscriminate attack, like a meteor shower. But it was not beautiful, but full of the horror of destruction. Bailey Chongqing laughed loudly, and the huge knight's lance in his hand danced like a windmill. Facing the boulders that kept falling from the sky, he used his lance to pick them up and fly them out. Those were boulders weighing several tons or even dozens of tons. Not to mention people, even if a truck was hit, it would be crushed into a discus. But Bailey Chongqing relied on his powerful strength and his powerful spear skills to make them deviate from their original trajectory. He stood in front of everyone and did not retreat a step, because at this time Bian Junwu was already dead, and he was the captain of the investigation team. He had to protect the team members from wind and rain. Seeing that it was too late to dodge, the others, who were trying to get to a safe area, started to try their best to resist with their own abilities. Zhang Yi was the easiest to deal with this kind of attack. His dimensional gate opened, and no matter how huge the rocks were, they would just disappear silently into another dimension. Compared to the two of them, the others looked much more embarrassed. Xiao Honglian's fire attack had little effect on the boulders. She could only use the purgatory furnace to strengthen her body and quickly dodge in the meteor shower. But the rocks flew through the air, and the boulders fell one after another, making her extremely embarrassed. Many mutants were hit by the boulders because they could not dodge in time, and they did not even have the chance to scream, and they turned directly into a pool of meat paste. "Everyone, come to my side and stay behind me," Zhang Yi shouted to everyone. At this moment, in order to deal with Yuan Konga, everyone's strength must be gathered. If everyone else was killed, Zhang Yi would be alone, and he had to try his best to protect these people, for now at least. Seeing Zhang Yi easily block the rain of boulders with his dimensional gate, the others immediately gathered in his direction. Once as enemies, they hated Zhang Yi's space ability. But now as comrades on the same front, this ability gave them a great sense of security. Everyone quickly ran behind Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi opened a huge dimensional door and blocked it above his head, like a big umbrella, so that the raindrops would not fall on everyone's heads. But the raindrops were not water, but boulders that could turn people into meat paste. However, they could hide under the dimensional door, but some people had no way to avoid it. They were ordinary believers and mutants of the Snow Worship sect. When they first saw Yuan Konga display her magical means, they all rejoiced and were extremely delighted. But Yuan Konga's attack was indiscriminate, covering them as well. They were defenseless and were wiped out in an instant. As of now, everyone, including the remaining mutants of the sect, are no longer of any extra value. It would be better to let them return to the kingdom of God, and then their power will be gathered on Yuan Konga. Zhang Yixian is dead, and Yuan Konga must win this battle. Only in this way can they build a world without filth. Come back to where you belong, Yuan Konga said lightly, and all the mutants killed but had taken her ice soul at some point returned to her. Everyone, including any of the believer currently alive at a safe distance, saw the current demise of their fellow worshippers and were shocked greatly. Seeing Yuan Konga kill all those believers together with her enemies, their faith completely collapsed. How could this happen? Why is the leader killing the devout believers as well? Some cried desperately, and others could only grit their teeth but do nothing other than to quickly retreat to avoid the attack of the boulders. It turns out that Yuan Konga was not a savior at all, but a devil. A lunatic to be exact. Yuan Konga ignored all of them, but her eyes were as cold as the extremely cold snow. Fortunately, her attention was on Zhang Yi and the others at this time, and she did not deliberately wipe them out. Otherwise, with her current strength, killing them would be a piece of cake. Yuan Konga lowered her head and stared at Zhang Yi, and whispered, "I want your spatial power too." She slowly raised her hand like a god, stretched out her hand and aimed at Zhang Yi and the others. Above the ground, the boulders that had already fallen shook violently, and then rose into the air again, turning into a huge storm of rocks around Zhang Yi and the others. There were flying boulders in all directions, and Zhang Yi and the others were in the center of the storm. Zhang Yi's eyes condensed. His dimensional gate could only open two at the same time, and it was impossible to defend all directions. Yuan Konga's telekinesis was many times stronger than Zhang Yixian's. They are not even on the same level at all. Not even a little. Is this the end for us? He questioned himself with a gritted teeth. At this moment, the others were not idle either. Xing Tian activated his Legion ability. As mentioned earlier, this supernatural power of his can be blessed on everyone to improve their combat effectiveness. With this blessing, the combat effectiveness of the remaining strongest mutants in Tianhai City raised to a higher level. Xiao Honglian and Waiting Hai activated their Flame Dragon Breath and Ice and Snow Blizzard abilities respectively, and attacked at the same time. The flames and blizzards swept in two directions, impacting the incoming rocks from those directions. Qi Guangming of the investigation team raised the black sniper rifle in his hand with a serious look. And as he aimed at Yuan Konga in the air, he knew that in order to catch a thief, you must first catch the leader. It was useless to deal with the rocks alone. Only by solving Yuan Konga can everything end. As long as Yuan Konga falls, the boulder storm will naturally disappear. A stream of golden light shot out from the muzzle of his gun. Yuan Konga's eyes were cold, and she didn't care about the bullet at all. But the next moment, her brows frowned slightly, because this bullet actually penetrated her telekinetic barrier. However, it stopped when it was less than a meter away from her. Qi Guangming frowned even deeper. She has too many types of abilities, so I can't deal with her at all. Zhang Yi saw the entire scene, so with a curious look, he asked what kind of bullet Qi Guangming used that could actually penetrate Yuan Konga's telekinetic barrier. After all, he clearly remembered that Wu Di's countless floating cannons could not affect the telekinetic barrier at all. Qi Guangming glanced at him and said it was an origin bullet. They were specially designed and used to deal with mutant creatures. Indeed, mutated creatures also naturally include humans with superpowers. Hearing this, Zhang Yi couldn't help but inwardly sigh slightly. Jiangnan District is really Jiangnan District indeed. In less than half a year after the end of the world, even bullets specifically used to deal with mutants have been developed. But thinking about it carefully, this thing has no effect on me. Because strictly speaking, my dimensional gate was not a defensive ability, but a door to another dimension. Origin Bullet was probably used to attack mutants who rely on superpowers for defense, such as the strengthening system, the orc system, and this kind of mutants with telekinetic barriers. At this time, Bailey Chongqing's voice interrupted his thoughts. We can't let her control the rhythm like this. From now on, everyone should listen to my command. He stared at Yuan Konga in the air, his eyes more focused than ever. Even if her current superpowers are powerful, this young girl still lacks combat experience. She would eventually reveal flaws. Bailey Chongqing quickly made a battle plan for everyone. He had discovered a weakness of Yuan Konga. That is, she could not do two things at the same time. When Qi Guangming attacked her with the origin bullet, her telekinesis control ability was obviously reduced, and the speed of the rock storm slowed down. So, apart from Qi Guangming, who will use the origin bullet to contain her actions, the rest of you will continue to attack her with long-range skills. I will be responsible for the main attack. As for the ultimate move, Bailey Chongqing glanced at Zhang Yi next to him. From the beginning till now, Zhang Yi hadn't even made a single attack. But Bailey Chongqing knew that he had an ultimate move hidden, his divine power. Although the attack range was not very large, but in terms of power, Zhang Yi's divine power was definitely not inferior to the destructive power of Bian Junwu. We will fight for you to use your pupil technique to deal a fatal blow to Yuan Konga. Bailey Chongqing even added with a serious expression. I will go over to entangle her, and if necessary, you can kill me along with her. Everyone present couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts when they heard this. It was obvious at this point that Bailey Chongqing was so determined to kill Yuan Konga that he was willing to sacrifice himself as well. However, the other members of the investigation team seemed to be used to it when they heard this. They had already put life and death aside in order to carry out the mission. And it wasn't that they were not afraid of death, but they understood that sometimes sacrifice was necessary, otherwise it will cause greater losses. They understood the bigger picture that if they couldn't kill Yuan Konga, no one will leave alive. Zhang Yi couldn't help but smile and reply that he got it. Bailey Chongqing chose to bear the greatest pressure alone, because among the people present, no one can even approach his level in terms of close combat ability. Well, let's start, he shouted. Xiao Honglian and Waiting Hai quickly took action and launched a fierce attack on Yuan Konga. Qi Guangming also raised his gun and fired another origin bullet. Yuan Konga knew that the golden bullet should not be taken lightly, so she frowned slightly and raised her left hand to condense a huge wall in front of her. Although the origin bullet had special functions for mutants, it was still just a bullet in the end, and its physical attack ability was relatively ordinary, so the huge wall blocked it easily. Yuan Konga then waved her other hand, and all the superpowers that attacked her were extinguished in the air like a flame being poured with water. But at this moment, Bailey Chongqing suddenly jumped high from the ground, disappearing from where he was initially like lightning, and holding his huge knight's lance with killing intent. He decisively attacked Yuan Konga from the back. Yuan Konga's eyes condensed. She did not look back, but she had already noticed Bailey Chongqing's attack. Silently moving like thunder, the lance stabbed Yuan Konga's back with tremendous force. An invisible ripple swayed in the air, and the telekinetic barrier blocked her back. The huge knight's lance stabbed over and actually broke through half a meter from the barrier, stopping a few centimeters away from her back. Even though he held the knight's lance tightly with both hands, Bailey Chongqing couldn't continue to exert force in the air, so his charged attack failed to deal any significant damage. But it did, however, distract Yuan Konga. And at this moment, Zhang Yi made a move. The moment when Yuan Konga was distracted by everyone was the moment when he made his move. White light flashed in his pupils, and then aimed at Yuan Konga in the air. This even covered Bailey Chongqing behind her. With a fight of this magnitude, life and death are determined in just a matter of seconds. The moment when Yuan Konga was distracted allowed Zhang Yi to lock on her. The terrifying pressure distorted the space around her, and finally a look of shock appeared in Yuan Konga's eyes. Zhang Yi actually has a pupil technique skill? Yuan Konga silently thought in astonishment. Between her and Zhang Yi, a strange distortion appeared in the space. It was like a rag being twisted in opposite directions by two people. Well then, let's see whose pupil technique is more powerful, Bian Junwu's or yours. At this moment, a dazzling golden light burst out from Yuan Konga's eyes, covering the surrounding world between them. Silently, a bizarre sphere appeared in the space between the two people, and even the light was distorted. But after a moment, the dazzling light dissipated in the air. Everything returned to calm. Only the ground under the ball of light, like cheese scalded by a red-hot iron, had a huge and smooth spherical depression. Accompanied with a loud boom, a figure fell to the ground like a meteor, and Bailey Chongqing, who was wearing a white combat uniform, was thrown to the ground. This man of steel and iron actually spilled a trace of blood from his mouth at this time. Has the captain's annihilation been mastered by her so quickly? Bailey Chongqing said this with a solemn face looking at Yuan Konga. He was very familiar with that power just now. It was Bian Junwu's pupil technique, Nirvana. She even mastered Bian Junwu's ability, Xiao Honglian said in astonishment. They have seen how strong Bian Junwu was. That is a terrifying ability that can kill hundreds of thousands of zombies by one's own strength. Now that Yuan Konga has obtained that ability, how can they fight? Bailey Chongqing stood up and said loudly, "No! She is not the captain. She just got the captain's special ability and doesn't know how to use it properly yet. We still have a chance to defeat her." He was very sure of this, because if it was the ability used by Bian Junwu just now, he would not be alive to be able to speak, let alone stand up. The appearance of Zhang Yi's divine power made Yuan Konga feel a sense of pressure, because that kind of power was enough to fight against her. Yuan Konga's eyes were fixed on Zhang Yi at this moment, a bit taken aback with Zhang Yi's sudden appetite. Zhang Yi silently took out several meat buns and stuffed it into his mouth. His divine power consumed too much of his energy, so he had to replenish his superpowers in time. Fortunately, he was a space-based ability user, and fighting a war of attrition was his strong point. Suddenly, with a murderous intent. Yuan Konga's eyes were full of rage. At first, she didn't take these people seriously. With her powerful strength, she thought she was close to the realm of God, and these weak mortals could not do anything to her. However, Zhang Yi's divine power made her feel a little scared. Perhaps these mortals really had the ability to hurt her, and this fear made her angry. So angry that she decided not to play anymore, but to kill everyone in front of her as soon as possible. Storms, bigger than the size of the destroyed church, spun around her. The terrifying whirlwind carried countless gravel, ice and snow, and even everything around it, turning into a huge tornado. Then this huge tornado hit everyone hard. The tornado attracted everything around it, and everyone's feet began to become unstable. They hurriedly retreated to avoid being swept into the middle of the tornado. Once they entered it, it would be a certain death. But when they thought they had run far away, the raging snowstorm rolled over the earth again. Wind, snow, gravel, all kinds of terrible abilities were displayed by Yuan Konga. For a time, no one could resist. Their abilities were certainly very powerful, but the level was completely different. When a mutant reaches level 5, the Epsilon level, which is the strongest level of mutants in the world, he or she is no longer in the same dimension as the lower mutants. With only just 2 legendary Epsilon mutants in the entire country, including the recently deceased Bien Junwer, Yuan Konga was now the 3rd, and upon facing her terrifyingly powerful strength, everyone was struggling to resist. Zhang Yi's dimensional gate could not protect everyone. This bug defense method that can defend against all physical attacks can keep him safe. His team was currently safe as well. But how can they fight this? Yuan Konga has too many abilities, so it was impossible to even find her weaknesses, if she has any, that is. Boss, let's run away, Chunlei suggested. Escape? Where to? Do you think we can still escape now? Zhang Yi stared coldly at Yuan Konga in the center of the storm. If he was alone, there would be no problem escaping. But it would not work with them. After all, he could react to the speed of space travel, but they couldn't. Any delay in the middle would delay time, and then Yuan Konga would quickly catch up. Now there is only one battle. If you win, Tianhai City will be peaceful from now on. If you lose, well, we can think about losing later. Zhang Yi stared at Yuan Konga in the air, with the power in his eyes ready to go. Yuan Konga felt this power, and her figure suddenly became illusory, as if countless afterimages overlapped, making it impossible for Zhang Yi to lock her position. However, the biggest advantage of Zhang Yi and everyone was their number. Bailey Chongqing said that Yuan Konga's combat experience was not rich enough, and he was right. Even though she has enough power, it is still flawed. Now with Zhang Yi's divine power as a restraint, Yuan Konga can't concentrate on dealing with everyone at the same time. So this gave them the opportunity to attack from the side. Xing Tian activated his supernatural power to the maximum extent and blessed everyone. Qi Guangming raised the sniper rifle in his hand, aiming the origin bullet at Yuan Konga's head, which also brought her a little pressure. Although she is not afraid of Qi Guangming, if she accidentally gets shot, it is not something she is willing to accept. Bailey Chongqing also held his knight's lance and patiently looked for an opportunity to attack with one shot. Although his defense was very amazing, if he is attacked by another pupil technique at close range, his defense would definitely be broken, along with his life. What annoying bugs. Do you really think you can resist me? What a joke. I'm a god. Yuan Konga's voice echoed coldly in the sky. As she waved her hands, an even more terrifying storm swept in all directions, as if to kill everyone with one blow. The main targets of the attack were Zhang Yi and Qi Guangming. Zhang Yi sensed this and immediately opened his double doors, taking his entire team away from the spot. The moment they left, the place where they previously were was smashed by countless rubble from all directions. However, Qi Guangming did not have the convenient ability to escape like Zhang Yi, and Yuan Konga's power covered every corner around him. As long as he looked up, he could see a giant whirlwind hundreds of meters high trapping him in the center. There was no escape. Yuan Konga was like a creature from a higher dimension, playing with his life at will. Unexpectedly, just when he was at a loss, a familiar roar came from his side, and a huge and familiar knight's lance tore a hole in the storm. "Captain, why are you here?" he questioned with an evident surprise. Although grateful, Qi Guangming thought at that moment that he was truly done for, and never expected his captain to appear suddenly at a critical moment. Bailey Chongqing, wearing a white combat uniform, rushed in, then clamped Qi Guangming under his arm, and rushed out through the storm. Oh, such a strong defense. Yuan Konga saw this scene. She recognized that it was the deputy captain of the investigation team, a top-level enhancement ability user. But how long can you resist my attack? Within a radius of 3 kilometers, Rocks flew through the air, and everything in the world became the object of her control. Her energy seemed endless, and she continued to attack everyone. Suddenly, she felt Zhang Yi's attack again from behind. Yuan Konga's attention has always been on Zhang Yi. Seeing this, she did not hesitate to use Nirvana to fight against it. The sudden clash of the two forces created a massive explosion in the air. At this point in the battle, the biggest threat to her was this person who has the ability to kill with one blow. These two forces burst out with strange light in the air and then annihilated. Zhang Yi took a deep breath and said to Liang Yu and the others at an extremely fast speed, "You guys need to leave here quickly. The current battle is no longer something you can intervene in. Indeed, the human wave tactics have no effect on the mutants who are beyond the general meaning. Now, on the entire battlefield, there are probably only a few of them who can have a certain impact on Yuan Konga. Anyone else who stayed there were just living targets for Yuan Konga and add burden to their teammates. Therefore, Zhang Yi asked Flower to take everyone else away. Even for Liang Yu, her melee ability would hardly play a big role at this time." Liang Yu wanted to argue, but then she saw Zhang Yi's serious and scary face. Time was running out, and Zhang Yi didn't want to waste words with her. She had to obey his orders. Liang Yu took a moment to control her emotions and think rationally about the situation. It was obvious at this point, and she figured out that her ability would not be of much help to Zhang Yi, and would even affect Zhang Yi's ability to use his space shuttle. "Okay, let's go." She reluctantly agreed and jumped on Flower's back, joining Uncle Yu and Xunlei. Before departure, Uncle Yu told Zhang Yi to be careful. The three people, together with Flower, looked at Zhang Yi worriedly, and then fled away. In the center of the battlefield, Xiao Honglian, Wei Dinghai, Xing Tian, and some members of the investigation team became the main force. After Yuan Konga mastered telekinesis, she could float in the sky and look down at everyone to fight. Therefore, all the enhancement-type ability users except Bailey Chongqing chose to retreat to the back to provide assistance and protection to the main attackers in front. And the support-type mutants, such as Meng Xiu and Yi Jikong, left the battlefield without hesitation. Wu Di's eyes were filled with hatred. He was surrounded by floating cannons, and the dazzling light balls emitted a terrifying impact force, shooting at Yuan Konga like a rainstorm. At the same time, Xing Tian used his own abilities to bless everyone, refueling them to keep fighting. Wei Dinghai's Ice and Snowstorm and Xiao Honglian's Flame Dragon were all trying their best to consume Yuan Konga and distract her attention. Without question, everyone knew that the only way to defeat Yuan Konga at this point was Zhang Yi, and his divine power was the key, because only his attack can pose a threat to Yuan Konga. So everyone, even Wu Di, tried their best to create an output environment for Zhang Yi. Yuan Konga felt irritated in the face of the attacks of more than a dozen mutants. These attacks were nothing to her, but she must always be on guard against Zhang Yi, who has the ability to kill with one blow. Once she has any defensive air raids, Zhang Yi's divine power will hit her, which may cause her serious injuries. It's obvious that the ending is certain to be your deaths. So why are you still struggling? Forget it. I don't have the patience to play with you anymore. Yuan Konga's cold voice came from high in the sky. She didn't like the appearance of something that was out of her control. Let me purify you completely with one blow. Yuan Konga continued, and in the pupils of her eyes, a sharp golden light quickly burst out. She was hanging high in the sky, like a sun, and the holy light swept in all directions. The annihilation power of Nirvana was stimulated to the maximum by her. The power that was enough to destroy everything reminded everyone of the famous scene where Bian Junwu killed hundreds of thousands of zombies alone. Bailey Chongqing and the others turned pale, because they felt that the power of this attack was already at the level of Bian Junwu. Run away. Everyone, run away as far as possible. Bailey Chongqing held Qi Guangming with one hand and Wu Di with the other, and his figure turned into a residual shadow as he ran to Zhang Yi's side. Xiao Honglian and the others also made the same move. They knew that now they could only rely on Zhang Yi's dimension gate to try to resist this power. Zhang Yi raised his right hand and opened the dimensional door to the maximum, and a huge dimensional door like the South Heaven Gate opened in front of him. However, several soldiers of the various major forces, who were not fast enough, were attacked by the burst of golden light and disintegrated into nothing. As the golden light of destruction disappeared from the earth, Zhang Yi exhaled a long breath, relieved that his dimensional door was able to block Yuan Konga's attack. After all, this kind of large-scale attack could not concentrate all the power in one place like his divine power. And due to this reason, the annihilation power of Nirvana was difficult to pose any threat to his dimensional door. However, among the group of survivors, Wei Dinghai was the most unfortunate. Using his frost armor to the maximum, his heavy armor covered him like a Gundam. But when the golden light of annihilation swept across the earth, His armor was shattered like a confetti. Wei Dinghai subconsciously stretched out his right arm in front of him. But to everyone's horror, his arm was directly destroyed as if it was fake. It turns out that he was able to save his life by hiding within the range of Zhang Yi's dimensional door at the last moment. Unfortunately, his whole body didn't make it. Wei Dinghai used ice to seal the wound on his arm, but fortunately he was not a melee-type mutant, and he could still fight even if he lost an arm. With just this one blow from Yuan Konga, she managed to kill almost all the mutants who were not many on the field. Only the leaders of a few forces and the few people from the investigation team were still alive. But everyone had no time to grieve because right now, whether they could survive or not was a huge challenge. The mood of despair began to spread in everyone's heart. They had tried their best, but they did not cause any harm to Yuan Konga, and they suffered heavy casualties. How can we fight next? Are we going to just wait to die? Are mutants of Epsilon level really invincible? These thoughts raced in everyone's mind as they stared at Yuan Konga from below. Yuan Konga exuded a sacred and soft light, looking down at Zhang Yi and the others. Zhang Yi, you are very capable. However, I have absorbed the abilities of 36 people, including the ability of Bian Junwu. How are you going to deal with it? She stared at Zhang Yi. A smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Then, stretching out her index finger, she pointed at Zhang Yi with a crazy look in her eyes. I also want your ability too. Zhang Yi silently stared at Yuan Konga, his eyes full of fear and caution. He said to everyone in a deep voice, "Now, we have to give everything and fight hard. Take out whatever trump card you have and fight with everything you have. Otherwise, we might all die here." Wu Di gritted his teeth and roared from behind. "We know it without you telling us." He said nothing else, but inwardly, he was in a dilemma. That is, even if they fight hard like Zhang Yi just said, can they really win? As a member of the investigation team, Wu Di didn't want to say such discouraging words, but he clearly thought of this over and over again. With a gloomy expression, Zhang Yi continued, "There is still a glimmer of hope if we fight with all our might. Otherwise, we will be doomed to fail and die." But at this moment, the group's brief moment of respite was over as a new round of attack was upon them again. Yuan Konga did not have the patience to wait until Zhang Yi and the others finished chatting. This time, the attack unexpectedly came from underground. The ground under their feet exploded, and hundreds of thorny vines with white frost stabbed at everyone from the soles of their feet. This is the ability of Dai Mei, who was once a priest of the Snow Worship sect. Originally, she was just an ordinary special ability user who could breed thorny vines from her body as a means of fighting. There was nothing remarkable when she died. In the zombie war just now, she was gnawed to the bone and there was no bone residue left. But her ability, in the hands of Yuan Konga, had become extremely powerful. This attack caught everyone off guard, and Zhang Yi decisively opened his space shuttle and left the original place. On the other hand, the others hurriedly used all means, even if they fell into the icy rocks. They tried their best to block the attacks from the thorns that were harder and sharper than steel. Perhaps it was Zhang Yi's words that inspired their fighting spirit, or it was the idea that the army of the underdog must win, and they lived to the death. These top-level mutants who were in the limelight finally started to fight for their lives. Wu Di gritted his teeth, and suddenly a surging spiritual power surged out of his body, rushing his hair high into the sky. In an instant, his blonde hair became whiter than snow, and the surging spiritual power wrapped around his body and made him fly high into the sky. Seeing this scene, Bailey Chongqing, Qi Guangming, and the rest of the investigation team who were hiding and watching the battle behind the building in the distance all showed expressions of reluctance. Wu Di's floating gun consumes spiritual power. But once this power is used excessively, it will consume his life. At this time, Wu Di had already disregarded the consequences and began to burn his mental power like crazy. However, this approach allowed him to briefly reach the threshold of Epsilon. Wu Di's change attracted Yuan Konga's attention. She frowned, not expecting this new trouble to arise. In the air, Wu Di laughed wildly like a madman. He knew what this approach meant to him, but now he had no other choice. Actually, to be precise, he didn't give a shit. After all, Bian Junwu could sacrifice for the team, so why couldn't he do the same? Die, you damn rotten bitch. Die, die, die. Wu Di lost it at this moment as countless balls of light were hurled at Yuan Konga in quick succession. This time around, the power of the attack was completely different from the previous ones. At least it was improved by several levels. However, they still couldn't penetrate Yuan Konga's telekinetic barrier. Realizing this, Wu Di changed his form of attack. He raised his hand high, and actually condensed a huge spiritual light ball with a radius of several meters, and then swung it towards Yuan Konga fiercely. The huge floating cannon was extremely fast, and it contained an extremely terrifying destructive power. The others below were not idle either, and they cooperated with Wu Di to attack Yuan Konga from all directions, especially Zhang Yi, who actually went around behind Yuan Konga and started to attack after he had a lock on her with his divine power. Zhang Yi and Wu Di used their strongest attack from two different directions. Yuan Konga's frown deepens, not daring to be negligent. She suddenly felt the threat of death and used her destructive power to counter. The terrifying light of destruction once again swept in all directions with her as the center, and then silently began to annihilate everything around her. The collision of these terrifying powers intertwined, causing a huge deafening explosion around Yuan Konga. Outside afar at a safe distance from the battlefield, the other members of the investigation team watching the scene couldn't stand it anymore. Although their abilities were not suitable for fighting Yuan Konga, they couldn't bear to see their teammates die tragically with their own eyes. Also, at some unspecified location, Liang Yu, Uncle Yu and the others saw the colorful luster in the sky and wondered if it was finally over. Although they fully trusted Zhang Yi, they also knew that he was most afraid of death, and he would do whatever it takes to survive, so dispatching them to safety with such confidence meant that he must have a way. He definitely has to, because Zhang Yi was never the hero type and had never cared about being shameless in order to survive. After that intense round, Yuan Konga's face finally showed a trace of fatigue. She can have countless superpowers, but the superpowers in her body can be exhausted. Facing the joint attack of two top mutants at the same time, even she couldn't be calm. However, after that attack, Wu Di's state took a sharp turn for the worse. His face became vicissitudes at a speed visible to the naked eye, and his eyes were a little dim. The next moment, he fell headfirst like a crashed plane. This attack exhausted everything he had. Bailey Chongqing rushed over and caught him. On the other hand, Zhang Yi quickly stuffed numerous supernatural food into his mouth while fighting. He was not afraid of a war of attrition. Even if he continuously displays his divine power, his superpowers can be quickly replenished. Zhang Yi and Wu Di's combined strongest attack finally made Yuan Konga look a little tired. However, the current situation was not optimistic, because except Zhang Yi, everyone else has suffered injuries of varying severity. Wu Di was completely useless and can no longer fight. A large pool of blood gushed out from the corner of Xiao Honglian's mouth. Even with the battle armor condensed by the purgatory furnace, she could not withstand the aftermath of the power of annihilation. As for Wei Dinghai, one of his arms was broken and the whole person was almost useless. Only Zhang Yi and Bailey Chongqing were still standing in the field. But how could the two of them defeat the nearly invincible Yuan Konga? Despair. Complete despair. The strength of high-level mutants were such a complete crushing to lower-level mutants. Just a few days ago, if it weren't for Bianjun death, Bailey Chongqing would even want to win Yuan Konga over and become a member of the Jiangnan region. But he couldn't do that now, because that would be a betrayal to Bianjun, a brother in life and death. Also, it's obvious at this point that Yuan Konga has serious mental issues. Why do you have to struggle so hard? That will only increase your pain. It's better to let me kill you quietly, so that you can all be free. Yuan Konga's voice came like a god. She saw that the people in front of her were no longer a threat to her. Even though Zhang Yi was a bit weird, his only threatening means could not break Yuan Konga's own. At this moment, Yuan Konga enjoyed this powerful feeling very much. This feeling of being able to dominate everything and destroy everything was really great. But at this moment, Zhang Yi suddenly spoke up, and his next words made everyone stare at him with a surprised look. Zhang Yi sighed softly and said to Bailey Chongqing and the others with a cold look, "Well, it seems that your limit has been reached. Although what you have done is a little less than I expected, it is almost enough." Zhang Yi's tone was a little loud, which made the people around him feel stunned after hearing it. Yes, they admitted that Zhang Yi's divine power had a great restraining effect on Yuan Konga. But in their impression, Zhang Yi's strength lies in defense, not attack. If it was a one-on-one today, he might be killed by Yuan Konga within 5 seconds. So they didn't understand why Zhang Yi suddenly changed his attitude. Zhang Yi waved to the others, but his eyes were always fixed on Yuan Konga, not leaving for a moment. "You guys should leave here. The next battlefield will be taken over by me." Things have developed to this point, and everything has developed as Zhang Yi thought at the beginning. The significance for bringing all these mutants along was to help him consume Yuan Konga's power as much as possible. Perhaps it can be said that from the very beginning, Zhang Yi did not expect to rely on them to defeat Yuan Konga. Bailey Chongqing looked at Zhang Yi in astonishment. "Zhang Yi, you are not kidding, right?" Zhang Yi replied calmly, "Of course not. No one would seek death at this time. They also don't think Zhang Yi would be the kind of great man who would sacrifice himself to fight for others to survive." But since Zhang Yi said so, They can only choose to believe it now. Then we will leave it to you. Xiao Honglian and Waiting Hai did not hesitate, and decisively dragged their injured bodies away. Xing Tian glanced at Zhang Yi and said calmly, "Old friend, our last hope is placed on you." He gathered all his remaining energy, and then blessed them all on Zhang Yi. This made Zhang Yi feel that his body was stronger and faster, and even his 5 senses became extremely sharp. Bailey Chongqing sent Qi Guangming and Wu Di, who was completely exhausted, away, while he remained on the battlefield. His injuries were not light, but he was still capable. Zhang Yi saw this scene and did not stop it. On the other hand, Yuan Konga did not stop them from leaving. In her eyes, they were all insignificant insects she could crush at any time she wanted. Also, no one in the entire Tianhai city could escape from her anyway. She was just very curious about Zhang Yi's sudden attitude, and didn't know what this man wanted to do, so she simply observed. After all, her biggest threat was him, and once she was done with Zhang Yi, she could handle the rest with ease. With his dimensional door open between himself and Yuan Konga, Zhang Yi took no chances and wasn't complacent. However, he thought that since Bailey Chongqing was willing, he would let him fight alongside with him. But he did not expect him to play a big role. Bailey Chongqing suddenly threw a black pistol over. Zhang Yi recognized it at a glance. It was the sidearm of their captain Bian Junwu. Zhang Yi frowned slightly. "A gun?" Bailey Chongqing said seriously. "There are about 20 origin bullets in it." The name of the origin bullet made Zhang Yi a little tempted. It is a bullet specially used to deal with mutants, and it can even pose a certain threat to Yuan Konga. "Okay, I'll take it." Zhang Yi raised his head and looked at Yuan Konga, squinting slightly. "Everything should have an end, right?" Yuan Konga's mouth curled up slightly. She was suspended in the air, and the sacred light was shrouded around her. "Who gave you the confidence?" "Zhang Yi, you know nothing about power. I haven't used my full strength yet." Yuan Konga opened her arms, and the majestic supernatural power formed a violent storm around her. And this time around, lightning was added to the mix. "Now, I'm slowly getting used to having so many abilities in my body. Don't worry. I'll kill you soon and take away your power too." With Yuan Konga in the center, more terrifying storm emerged. And the ground beneath Zhang Yi and Bailey Chongqing's feet was even more broken, with countless broken stones floating in the air. Bailey Chongqing used his flexible speed to jump away, stepping on one boulder after another in the air, trying to attack Yuan Konga. Yuan Konga's eyes were full of fierceness, and she pointed his 5 fingers of her left hand at him, and a huge telekinesis swept him away directly. Even the most powerful enhancement ability users cannot use their own power in the air. Zhang Yi ignored Bailey Chongqing. When the vibration under his feet began, his figure flashed in the air and appeared on a rooftop opposite Yuan Konga. The vector direction of the alternate space is not affected by the outside world. Therefore, as long as Zhang Yi controls the direction of the dimensional door, he can achieve any teleportation within a range of 300 meters, or even stagnate in the air. Yuan Konga waved her right hand, and a violent tornado several thousand meters long hung upside down, like a sword of Damocles, stabbing Zhang Yi fiercely. But Zhang Yi didn't even dodge. He stood on the ruins of a building and opened his right hand. The violent tornado completely sank into Zhang Yi's dimensional door. The next moment, a second door suddenly opened on the right side of Yuan Konga, and the tornado she released turned around and began to attack her. Yuan Konga gave a look, and the huge tornado shattered. "Dimensional door, huh? Then can you handle this move?" Yuan Konga asked coldly. The next moment, with Zhang Yi as the center, hundreds of hurricane-shaped spheres suddenly appeared in countless directions. They rushed towards his position in an instant. With a loud boom, the hurricane swept through the space wildly, and the rooftop had been smashed to pieces. But Zhang Yi appeared from another place the next moment. He was safe and sound, and even his expression was the same as before, a look in his eyes of utter indifference. Bailey Chongqing, Xiao Honglian, and the others in the distance were all surprised to see this scene. Xiao Honglian was stunned and couldn't help whispering, "Turns out that, in the past, he has never used his true strength in front of us." Perhaps only Liang Yu and a few others knew how terrifying Zhang Yi's ability to save his life was. His dimensional gate was already perverted enough, and now he has the ability to travel through space, which is enough to make him immune to almost all physical attacks. Yuan Konga saw that Zhang Yi was safe and sound, and a hint of surprise flashed in her eyes. But soon she sneered disdainfully. "You can only run away." Although Yuan Konga hated Zhang Yi's ability, she was not afraid. In the past, the Jiangnan region completed the collection of intelligence on the abilities of the mutants in the entire Tianhai city. Regarding Zhang Yi's ability, they had analyzed it a long time ago. The conclusion was that the defense was full, but the offensiveness was insufficient. Even now that Zhang Yi has the ability of his divine power, this skill of his consumes too much energy and has a significant pre-swing. Unless it is a sneak attack, it is impossible to kill Yuan Konga in a head-on battle. Yuan Konga believes that she is invincible. Of course, Zhang Yi also thinks so. The sharpest spear versus the strongest shield. Which one will win? The people watching the battle from a distance were extremely nervous, but they could only pray for Zhang Yi. "Come and kill me if you have the ability." Zhang Yi sneered and made a provocative gesture to Yuan Konga. In return, it is naturally a more fierce attack. Zhang Yi's figure kept flashing in the air. With the ability to shuttle through space, his ability to save his life was really first class. Yuan Konga could not lock him to attack, and ordinary physical attacks would be absorbed by the dimensional gate. Therefore, she could only expand her attack range so that Zhang Yi could not escape from her attack area. But what she didn't expect was that Zhang Yi actually showed a new ability at this time. Although the dimensional gate has a huge area and strong defensive ability, its weakness is that the defense range is one way and cannot be moved. After obtaining this ability, Zhang Yi has been constantly improving it. Finally, he has opened a more flexible defensive skill-dimensional shield. He can compress the two-dimensional gates to the size of a shield and then control it with both hands. Although the area is reduced, it is more flexible and convenient to defend against attacks from all over the body. Moreover, he does not need to free his hands to launch an attack. In the battle with Yuan Konga, his only effective means of attack is the pupil technique, divine power. This battle was fought to the border of the snow worship sect, and the avenue had almost been wiped out. With the defense ability with almost no dead angles, no matter how terrible the attack of Yuan Konga was, it will be absorbed by Zhang Yi with a dimensional shield and then bounced back. Zhang Yi is not always in a passive state of being beaten. Once he finds Yuan Konga's gap, he will use his divine power to attack. Yuan Konga has always been afraid of Zhang Yi's divine power, and the attack cannot be too wanton. Whenever Zhang Yi uses his divine power, she must also use nirvana to counterattack. With the ruins of the snow worship sect as the center, the area of 10 kilometers became the battlefield for the two. Spherical illusory light balls appeared in the air, and everything within the range would be devoured. Logically speaking, Zhang Yi's current combat power is far inferior to Yuan Konga, and he can't sustain such a long battle. However, on the one hand, he has the blessing power of the Xingtian Legion, and on the other hand, he has stored a large amount of supernatural food in his alternate space. While fighting, he will eat to restore his physical strength and supernatural power. If not, he will be completely exhausted after using at most 5 rounds of his divine power. And because of this, he felt the horror of Yuan Konga. After fighting for so long, her supernatural power is still as terrifying as the ocean. Zhang Yi has a profound experience of the power of level 5. This is based on the fact that Yuan Konga is not proficient in combat experience. As for the others, they can only watch the battle. Even Bailey Chongqing gave up joining the battle later. In his opinion, in a battle of this level, he could only be a burden, and was not qualified to join in. Because of this, everyone's attitude towards Zhang Yi changed from being unfavorable at the beginning to being shocked now. This defense is too terrifying. Fortunately, we didn't keep fighting with Zhang Yi, otherwise, we would have been the ones to be destroyed in the end. Xiao Honglian and Wei Dinghai had the same idea in mind. But even if they continue to fight like this, it's not a big deal. Meng Xiu looked solemn. The difference in the amount of superpowers in the bodies of mutants of different levels is also extremely huge. Especially after reaching level 5, it can't be understood from the perspective of ordinary mutants. Zhang Yi's attack has no effect on her. Even if it can delay her time, he can't win. Once Yuan Konga gets tired, he can just leave him and attack us first. Everyone's heart sank. What Meng Xiu said does make sense. Zhang Yi's defense is just strong, so Yuan Konga can't kill him for a while. But if Yuan Konga wants to leave, Zhang Yi can't keep him. With telekinesis, her flying speed is not much different from teleportation. She can completely abandon Zhang Yi and kill the others first. Except trusting Zhang Yi, we have no other choice. Bailey Chongqing said in a deep voice, "If Yuan Konga really wants to kill us, we will never be able to escape from an Ypsilon." They had even heard of the first Ypsilon mutant, the mysterious strong man in Shangjing district, who can even kill people thousands of miles away. Everyone knew that Bailey Chongqing was right. Under the absolute power gap, all small thoughts were in vain. Unless Zhang Yi can beat Yuan Konga, or at least consume her so much that she can't chase him, otherwise there is no point in them running. On the battlefield, Zhang Yi and Yuan Konga have been fighting for more than 10 minutes. Yuan Konga's eyes gradually showed an anxious look. She has used dozens of methods to deal with Zhang Yi. But Zhang Yi's dimensional shield and space shuttle are simply bugs. You can't hit him and you can't catch him. This made Yuan Konga, who thought she was close to a god, very angry at this point. Her attack became more terrifying. She even began to use nirvana to attack Zhang Yi. Obviously, he also counters with his divine power. Then, another big move between the bombardments. Colorful colors appeared in the space again. A building was affected, and a spherical hole was melted directly from the waist, and then it collapsed with a loud bang. Yuan Konga couldn't defeat Zhang Yi for a long time, and her mood became more and more anxious. At this time, she missed Zhang Yixin more and more. She only needed to be a symbol of the snow worship sect and worship her snow god all day long. Zhang Yixin, if you were still here, you would definitely know how to solve such troubles, right? Yuan Konga couldn't help but sigh slightly. But suddenly, an idea flashed in her mind. Because of her impatience before, she was entangled by Zhang Yi. However, thinking about it now, what would Zhang Yixin do at this time? She believes that she was in luck, so she momentarily gave up on pursuing Zhang Yi to find trouble with Uncle Yu and the other two. Yuan Konga thought that as long as she captures and attacks the people Zhang Yi cares about, he would have no other choice but try to save them. Only by this strategy will Zhang Yi reveal his flaws. Unexpectedly, Yuan Konga only realized at this time that Uncle Yu and the others had long disappeared. Huh? Where are they? She questioned herself with an evident shock itched on her face. It's too late for you to learn to be smart now, Zhang Yi said from below. Yuan Konga turned her murderous gaze towards him. Zhang Yi's eyes flashed at this very moment, but there was a hint of mockery at the corner of his mouth. All this was arranged by him, because at this precise moment, Uncle Yu and the others were long gone, and nowhere to be found. It was obvious at this point that Yuan Konga, who had been fighting with Zhang Yi, didn't notice this at all. Only Xiao Honglian and the others were still nearby. When they saw Yuan Konga rushing towards them, their faces changed drastically. Yuan Konga glanced at Zhang Yi angrily. Zhang Yi looked indifferent. Anyway, he wouldn't put himself in danger to save these people he hardly gave a shit about. If Yuan Konga wanted to kill them, she could do so with his blessing. However, if Yuan Konga wanted to kill Bailey Changqing, Xiao Honglian and the others, she would expose her back to Zhang Yi. And this would be a great opportunity for Zhang Yi to attack her by surprise. Yuan Konga had to think about how to solve this dilemma quickly. What a hateful guy, she shouted in anger. Yuan Konga's calm and composed expression disappeared from her face. Even though she had the power to push everything, she had no way to deal with this bug-level defense. Zhang Yi was like a warlike black tortoise at this time, with a hard tortoise shell all over his body, and you couldn't break it no matter what. But once you reveal a flaw, there is a snake hidden in the tortoise shell, which will bite you hard. It's really annoying. Yuan Konga tried to calm herself down. She wouldn't let Zhang Yi dictate the battle anymore. She must definitely find his weakness and be done with him. Yuan Konga knew she lacked combat experience, but as the actual combat progressed, she'd slowly learned a lot. She judged the characteristics of Zhang Yi's defensive ability. Zhang Yi's range was limited, and his space travel was limited to a range of 300 meters. The dimensional shield was also limited to protecting the space around him. So if she wants to defeat him, she must use a large-scale range attack, and the power must be strong enough. Yuan Konga has been using this method, but it has not worked well. Unexpectedly, a flash of inspiration sprouted in her mind, and suddenly she had a new way. As long as she restricts Zhang Yi's ability to travel through space and then break his shell, everything will be solved. Her gaze gradually turned serious. Her hair moved slightly without wind, and with her as the center, a raging golden flame suddenly emerged, turning into hundreds of fire dragons covering over 300 meters. This high-temperature attack was something Zhang Yi couldn't avoid. Fortunately, he was wearing his combat uniform. This combat uniform was specially made to withstand temperature of thousands of degrees in a short time. Zhang Yi used the dimensional shield to block the attack in front of him. But the next moment, the hundreds of huge fire dragons actually bypassed him, and then suddenly slammed into the ground. Zhang Yi frowned when he saw this scene. It was not a direct attack on him, so what is the purpose? He silently thought. The huge fire dragon rushed into the ground, and suddenly thick white smoke spread. With ice and snow everywhere in sight, they instantly melted into thick water vapor, and also blocked Zhang Yi's sight. Are you trying to sneak attack me? Zhang Yi was immediately alert, and soon he felt like he was in a foggy valley, and he couldn't see anything. The temperature around him was getting higher and higher. Zhang Yi wanted to escape from this area, but the huge space around him had been affected by the high temperature, and there was white fog everywhere. Zhang Yi couldn't even tell the direction. Suddenly, waves of water sounded in his ears. A huge lake had appeared on the ground. In front of Zhang Yi's eyes, a very strange scene appeared. Drops of water quickly rose into the air and came to his surroundings, filling up the entire space. Not good. Zhang Yi immediately realized that something was wrong. At this time, even if he used his space shuttle, he could not escape the range covered by these water drops. More and more water drops floated into the air, turning into a long river in the air with a wide coverage. In the sky, Yuan Konga exhaled downwards. It was a white smoke, and after it came out of her mouth, it quickly turned into a huge ice and snowstorm, and the long river began to freeze in an instant, and in less than a second or two, it all condensed into one giant piece. The drop in temperature caused the mist to turn into ice particles and fall. As the mist dissipated, an unimaginable spectacle appeared on the battlefield. A huge cube of ice, with Zhang Yi trapped inside, stood in the center of the battlefield, and its length reached several thousand meters. Yuan Konga's expression showed a trace of fatigue. Even with her current strength, it would be extremely consuming to use such a large-scale supernatural power. However, Yuan Konga neither cared nor thought of it, because at this very moment, she had a happy smile on her face. Even if you are very good at dodging, you can't avoid from such a large-scale attack, she declared in full delight. However, as soon as she finished speaking, a dimensional door was opened above the huge ice block, and seconds after, Zhang Yi walked out of the dimensional door. He exhaled a long breath, and then looked up at the sky with a smile on his face. This combination skill is very creative, he said, but it's a pity that it's useless against me. You see, his alternate space was not a suitable environment for survival. It is a pure blank area, and there is also no air in there. However, entering it for a short period of time will not pose a threat to your life. Therefore, it can be used as a temporary space to avoid attacks. Zhang Yi used this ability to dodge Yuan Konga's assault just now. That's impossible. Yuan Konga was stunned for a moment, and her eyes shook wildly like a dark tide. She finally thought of this method and believed she'd succeeded. But not only was Zhang Yi unharmed, but she was out of great ideas to take him down. Zhang Yi, I don't believe I can't kill you. Yuan Konga roared. This devout believer of the snow god, the cold leader of the snow worship sect, was as furious as an ordinary 20-year-old girl throwing a tantrum. But just when she was about to attack again, a strong sense of discomfort suddenly rose in her mind, and her vision began to blur. Yuan Konga frowned and rubbed her forehead with her hand, not taking this feeling seriously. But this subtle change was captured by Zhang Yi. A smile slowly rose at the corner of his mouth, and then he hooked his finger at Yuan Konga in a rampant manner. Come on, if you have the guts, come and kill me. Oh, by the way, I'd like to inform you that the wound on Zhang Yixin's chest was caused by me. Immediately upon hearing this, Yuan Konga's expression became absolutely ferocious. She gritted her teeth with an uncontrolled fury. Fine, if that's the case, then I'll make sure you don't get an easy death. You will suffer and join him soon. Yuan Konga condensed a huge golden fireball in her right hand and hurled it at Zhang Yi with an impressive speed. But with the activation of his eightfold speed, Zhang Yi's figure moved to the side like a ghost, dodging the assault with ease. Let us wait and see, he said. Yuan Konga continued her relentless onslaught as she became more and more irritated about the ineffectiveness of her long-ranged attacks. It was not that Yuan Konga's strength was not strong enough, but her actual combat experience was too weak. Nonetheless, she was determined to kill Zhang Yi here and now. However, as Yuan Konga fought further, her body showed more obvious discomfort. The world was spinning in her mind, and she felt a strong nausea as if she was carsick. And the scene in front of her began to blur, especially when her current output went up like crazy. This feeling became more obvious. She suddenly realized that this feeling was not caused by her emotions, nor was it that she had a sudden illness. After thinking about this, she suddenly stopped in midair, covering her forehead with one hand, and asked Zhang Yi through her gritted teeth, "You scoundrel! What did you do to me?" After seeing Yuan Konga's reaction, the smile on Zhang Yi's mouth gradually became rampant. Sure enough, has it started? No, I can't laugh yet. I must slowly lead her into the abyss step by step. So, with these thoughts, Zhang Yi said sarcastically, "It seems that you can't control your own power yet. Perhaps it's the dead whose powers you have absorbed, and their wronged souls are also entangled in you." Yuan Konga stared at Zhang Yi fiercely, and her body was in great pain at this time. But Zhang Yi's words touch a nerve, making her feel uneasy. After all, in order to achieve her goal of becoming stronger, she used too many means and killed many mutants who had used her ice soul. "Shut up! You know nothing about me?" Yuan Konga gritted her teeth, endured the pain of her body, and launched a fierce attack on Zhang Yi. Suddenly, the icy earth broke, the dark clouds rolled back, the wind was howling, the flames were boiling, and the ice and snow were surging. Countless powerful powers, she had them at her fingertips. But all this could not cause any substantial harm to Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi is like a small tumbler. Even if he is under an extremely powerful attack, he can't be knocked down in the midst of the storm. The only weakness in the stalemate between him and Yuan Konga is that the supernatural energy in his body is far less than that of Yuan Konga. But he'd certainly made up for it with Xing Tian's blessing and the supernatural food in his alternate space. Zhang Yi knew from the very beginning that the strongest power in his arsenal, his divine power, would not be enough to kill Yuan Konga. So he secretly devised a way that was strong enough to aid him. This aid, although it had to slowly build up, was the changes in Yuan Konga's body. This was Zhang Yi's grand finale in his second plan among his 3 plans. Supernatural toxins. The third plan was to cut his losses and immediately leave Tianhai City when the first 2 plans failed. The first plan was based on the premise that Yuan Konga and Zheng Yixin could perfectly control the group of corpses. So under the threat from the Jiangnan region, they were supposed to sacrifice the entire army of undead in exchange for a short peace in Tianhai City. And during this brief period, Zhang Yi will then find a way to use the power of the Jiangnan region to get rid of the snow worship sect. However, this plan failed when Yuan Konga and Zheng Yixin never sacrificed the entire army, but kept a majority of them, meaning that the exact moment the investigation team left Tianhai City, there would be no short peace because Yuan Konga and Zheng Yixin would attack immediately. Due to this, Zhang Yi was only left with the option of keeping the investigation team in Tianhai City at all cost. Unfortunately, things spiral out of control when the investigation team disturbed the group of corpses and were later trapped in Radiant Prosperity Base. And on top of that, Zhang Yi found out that Yuan Konga and Zheng Yixin never had complete control over the group of corpses. So under the threat of the god of death of love, the second plan was naturally launched. And the key was Bian Junwu, who has supernatural toxins in his body. It has been said before that there were countless mutations in this world, and these mutations were not all positive, there are also negative ones. Bian Junwu's ability had a flaw, and that was, every time he releases a skill, he will lose his light and suffer incurable injuries to his body as a price. Mutation was at the genetic level, so it could not be cured by modern medicine. So, when Yuan Konga absorbed the supernatural power of the host of an ice soul, she also naturally gets its negative effects as well. Zhang Yi didn't just guess about this matter. In the letter that Li Jian wrote to him, he made mention of a female priest of the snow worship sect that had the ability to control ice and snow with her breath. Her supernatural power had a negative effect, which was that it damages her lungs. Therefore, once she uses her ability, she will cough frequently. Yuan Konga got her ability when she strangled her to death. A day not long after that, she used her ability in public and showed miracles to the church members. But she found herself coughing a few times, and the movement was exactly as that of the female priest she killed. Based on this, Zhang Yi judged that Yuan Konga not only absorbed the superpowers of her victims, but she also absorbed the mutated negative energy. A carefully planned strategy with Bian Junwu as the core. Zhang Yi was the only one in Tianhai City who knew about the defects of Bian Junwu's abilities. Therefore, neither Yuan Konga nor Zheng Yixin knew about the price of using nirvana. When Yuan Konga got this powerful ability that could destroy everything within her sight, she was extremely excited and couldn't wait to use this power to wipe out everyone. Not knowing that for an Epsilon-level mutant, the stronger the power she used, the greater the backlash caused by the side effects. This was the reason why Bian Junwu was slowly dying away, but the moment he used nirvana at an Epsilon level, he died immediately. What Zhang Yi needed to do was to fight a protracted war with Yuan Konga and force her to keep using her abilities. The people in Tianhai City were fighting a round-robin battle with Yuan Konga. The investigation team, together with a few dozens of mutants from the several major forces, had already consumed a wave of Yuan Konga's energy. After they were defeated, Zhang Yi made up for it. The smile on Zhang Yi's face became more and more intense. In this way, as long as Yuan Konga is killed, not only can the crisis in Tianhai City be completely resolved, but with the others being beaten and disabled, no one can snatch Yuan Konga's essence from him when she dies. The essence of a mutant at the level of Epsilon. Once Zhang Yi absorbs her ability, it is equivalent to absorbing the abilities of dozens of mutants at the same time. He could probably use this to advance to the level of Epsilon. At this moment, Zhang Yi was taunting Yuan Konga, deliberately trying to provoke her to use her powers excessively for obvious reasons. I know you hate this world and want to destroy everyone, but you are not innocent. If your parents had not founded a cult and defrauded many believers of their money, making them bankrupt, you would not have ended up like that. Yuan Konga's pupils shrank suddenly. That period of history is the biggest shadow in her heart that she has never wanted to face. Zhang Yi's words made her recall those fragmented fragments of memory. How her parents died in a plane crash. At her parents' funeral, angry believers rushed over and overturned her parents' coffins. Among the believers who had nowhere to vent, some people pushed her down viciously. Then, there was endless inhumane torture. Zhang Yi rushed over like a wounded beast to save her, but was knocked to the ground by someone who held his foot down on him. No matter how he begged, his eyes were full of bloodshot, and those people did not stop what they did to her. For a whole day and night, the pain had penetrated deep into her bones, and she once doubted that she could survive. Yuan Konga suddenly hugged her head tightly and uttered a loud and desperate cry. A powerful force swept out like a storm, with her as the center. Yuan Konga's vision had begun to blur at this time. She looked at Zhang Yi but couldn't see his outline clearly. Her head hurt more and more, and a strong sense of crisis enveloped her heart. Zhang Yi, what did you do to me? Answer me. Zhang Yi looked at Yuan Konga from a distance. At this time, he was not in a hurry. This kind of backlash of superpowers cannot be treated. As long as Yuan Konga starts to attack, it will only develop towards a worse situation. Guess whether I will tell you or not. Zhang Yi said with a smile. He couldn't give Yuan Konga a chance to crack his tricks, although at the moment, his painstaking plan was about to take effect. But a journey of 100 miles begins with a single step. He couldn't be careless at the last moment. Yuan Konga stared at Zhang Yi fiercely. She had already concluded in her heart that Zhang Yi must have used some kind of ability on her at some point, causing her body to have problems. You'll pay for this, you opinionated bastard, Yuan Konga scolded coldly. Her body suddenly began to emerge with a vast golden light, wrapping her whole body. This was her blessing ability, which could cure all diseases and injuries of the human body. But this time, the moment Yuan Konga's ability just started, she felt that the situation was unexpected. Not only did the discomfort in her body not disappear, but as she increased the output of her supernatural power, her vision became more blurred, and her headache became more severe. Her chest suddenly hurt, and she couldn't help coughing. Taking the advantage created from her sudden illness to kill her, Zhang Yi would not miss such a good opportunity. He would not leave Yuan Konga any room to breathe. Only the dead can be trusted. His divine power was activated again, piercing through Yuan Konga's defense. Yuan Konga sensed this huge crisis and used nirvana to resist at the same time. This attack, she blocked again, but her body became worse and worse, and her coughing intensified as well. In the distance, everyone who had almost lost their fighting spirit and power was watching this battle. Seeing that Yuan Konga suddenly had problems with her body and coughed violently, everyone felt incredibly astonished, because from beginning to this very precise moment, they did not see what means Zhang Yi used. Moreover, they have known Zhang Yi for such a long time, so they are more familiar with Zhang Yi's abilities. He is a space-based mutant, and he doesn't have the ability to poison people. Besides, it is almost impossible to poison an Epsilon-level mutant during a battle. When Bailey Chongqing saw Yuan Konga coughing, he suddenly understood everything. It's the captain's ability. Not only him, but all the members of the investigation team understood this. The mutants in Tianhai City, who neither knew nor understood the defects of Bian Zhenwu's abilities, suddenly seemed to have grasped the concept now. Meng Xiu murmured, after she absorbed the captain's abilities. She also got the side effects of the captain's special abilities. Is Zhang Yi doing it on purpose? Or is it a coincidence? She looked at Bailey Chongqing and the others, with a bit of astonishment in her eyes. Is it really a coincidence? She questioned again because it doesn't look like it at all. But if Zhang Yi planned it from the very beginning, then it meant that when he asked Bian Zhenwu to use the Ice Soul, he had actually calculated Bian Zhenwu as well. Wu Di, lying in his sleeping bag, cursed weakly. That bastard, he actually plotted against us. No, he did nothing wrong, Bailey Chongqing said calmly. Under the circumstances at that time, he did the right thing. The only way to survive was for the captain to sacrifice himself using an Ice Soul. I think the captain also guessed Zhang Yi's plot against him, but he did what was needed of him anyway. He stared at the two people on the battlefield and actually felt a kind of admiration for Zhang Yi. But this guy was able to set up such a big chess game. It's really amazing. Even we have become chess pieces in his hands, although being used by others would be a little unpleasant. Bailey Chongqing admired Zhang Yi's scheming and skills. But Wu Di cursed, awesome? This guy, I must. Wu Di was already close to exhaustion, and at this time he was so angry that he almost fainted. Meng Xiu comforted him. Okay, the things there have nothing to do with us for the time being, you should rest first. Seeing that Yuan Konga finally had problems, everyone was very excited and somewhat in awe of Zhang Yi. It felt like they had finally seen a hope of life. But this hope depends entirely on Zhang Yi being able to thoroughly defeat Yuan Konga. Only then would they have a chance to survive. Everyone knew this very well and watched the battle silently. Meanwhile, on Zhang Yi's side on the battlefield, He ate to replenish his physical strength while fighting Yuan Konga from a distance. Yuan Konga was in serious health problems at this time. Her vision was blurred, and she was also feeling very uncomfortable. However, she continued to attack and defend desperately. Zhang Yi reduced the rate at which he used his divine power. He knew that although this ability consumed a lot of energy for him, he couldn't abuse it by constantly replenishing it through eating. After all, he still needed to maintain a strong enough fighting capacity until the very end of the battle. He also knew very well that once Yuan Konga was really defeated, the group of people around him would never miss such an opportunity. After all, this was the origin of the mutant at the level of Epsilon. However, Zhang Yi was dead set on making this origin power his and his alone. Zhang Yi took Bian Zhenwu's pistol and used his ability to jump through space to dodge Yuan Konga's attacks. With the black pistol in hand, Zhang Yi's offensive method was changed to the origin bullet. This black pistol, previously used by Bian Zhenwu, was larger than the general model of pistol and also had a longer barrel. After the black bullet was fired from the barrel, it carried a destructive force. Against ordinary people or objects, its power is no different from that of ordinary bullets. But once it encounters a mutant, its destructive power is unimaginable. Even if it was in Qi Guangming's hands, it would have a certain impact on Yuan Konga, not to mention that it was in Zhang Yi's hands at this time. At the same time, he took advantage of her physical pain and inability to concentrate to shoot her. The power of each origin bullet cannot be underestimated. Yuan Konga could have used telekinesis to move at high speed and dodge the attack of the origin bullet. But at the beginning, she was unwilling to dodge, because once she began to actively dodge Zhang Yi's attack, it meant that she entered the defensive stage. This was something she, who claimed to be the apostle of God, absolutely could not accept. So her choice was to use telekinesis to take the origin bullet. But in this way, her ability consumption speed was greatly accelerated. And the side effects of Bian Zhenwu's ability were even more intense. Later, Yuan Konga finally realized the crux of the problem. But she'd already gotten her foot off the tiger's neck, and now she was paying for the consequences with a massive interest. Yuan Konga noticed that using her abilities made her weaker and weaker. However, if she doesn't use her abilities, she would be killed quickly by Zhang Yi. Not to mention that there were many mutants around, waiting for her to fall. Damn it! Does this mean I'm going to lose? This thought emerged in her mind for the first time, and she was unwilling to admit it. After all, she and Zhang Yixin had been planning for so long until his unexpected death. She has obtained the abilities of dozens of mutants, including the abilities of top mutants like Bian Zhenwu. She thought she was invincible, and no one in the entire Tianhai city could withstand her attack. However, the appearance of a single mutant, Zhang Yi, had forced her into a desperate situation. If it was just about attack power, Zhang Yi would not have been a threat to her. Although Zhang Yi's divine power was strong, the attack range was limited. So as long as Yuan Konga wanted to leave, Zhang Yi would definitely not be able to stop her. Although Zhang Yi had a bug-level defense and was being aided by the supernatural toxins in Yuan Konga's body, he was able to get this far mainly on Yuan Konga's inexperience in combat. If it were a combat-experienced mutant with this power, Zhang Yi would not be able to achieve his goal so easily. After all, Epsilon represents the highest level of mutants in the world. And the supernatural energy in Yuan Konga's body was so much that even with Xing Tian's blessing, Zhang Yi had to constantly replenish his energy with supernatural food. Yuan Konga, what's wrong with you? We've only been fighting for such a long time. Are you going to surrender? Zhang Yi attacked Yuan Konga, not giving her room to breathe, and mocked her as well. As long as you surrender to me and abolish your supernatural powers, I can consider leaving you alive. Zhang Yi tempted her, trying to disturb Yuan Konga's mind. With his dimensional door wide open in front of him, he started firing rapidly at Yuan Konga. Now, although Yuan Konga's vision was blurred, her fighting power was still extremely strong. She could still sense the surrounding things through the enhanced physique of her power. She never expected that someone would use her ice soul to set up a game and deliberately give it to a mutant with huge negative effects. It was too late to wake up at this time. The negative effects had already broken out, causing serious damage to her body. It can't even be alleviated by her healing ability. After all, as mentioned earlier, mutations at the genetic level were irreversible. Even though she knew using her abilities was the cause of her present situation, she still hasn't figured out that it was the use of nirvana that initiated all her pain. Yuan Konga's expression gradually twisted, and she asked Zhang Yi fiercely, "Zhang Yi, you scoundrel! When did you attack me? Tell me, I want to know the answer." Zhang Yi's mouth curled up slightly. "Go and ask the King of Hell when I send you off to meet him." After that, he fired another origin bullet at Yuan Konga's head. Yuan Konga waved her hands immediately, and a huge golden wall appeared in front of her, blocking the origin bullet. But after using her superpower, her head also started hurting like crazy. Yuan Konga covered her head in pain, her body swaying in the air. No, I can't continue to waste time with him. Yuan Konga finally realized that it was not a solution to fight like this. The man in front of her perfectly restrained her ability. She had to leave and take time to solve her physical problem. After she fully adapted to her new power, she would come back and kill everyone. Thinking of this, Yuan Konga endured the severe pain, suddenly turned in the opposite direction of Zhang Yi and fled. Zhang Yi was not surprised at all. He had predicted all the choices Yuan Konga might make. No matter what, Yuan Konga must die in his hands today. Even Jesus can't stop him. He said, "Aren't you called a god? Why are you running?" Zhang Yi calmly replenished his energy while chasing after Yuan Konga. But in order to prevent Yuan Konga from suddenly killing a carbine, Zhang Yi neither hung far away from her nor did he get too close to her. Because Yuan Konga has absorbed a lot of supernatural powers, including powerful enhanced mutants, her melee ability must be very strong. Zhang Yi would not take any risks. As long as the injuries in Yuan Konga's body erupted, she would die. Zhang Yi was a qualified hunter and had plenty of patience. Yuan Konga flew very fast. With telekinesis, she quickly swept across the sky and turned into a stream of golden light. But no matter how fast she was not as fast as Zhang Yi, who had the ability to jump through space. Just as Yuan Konga fled far away, Bailey Chongqing and the people from several major forces who were watching the battle became excited. Yuan Konga escaped. That means that Zhang Yi won the battle, right? Bailey Chongqing stared at Yuan Konga in the air. His eyes were low, and a solemn look flashed across his eyes. If he could seize the origin of an Epsilon-level mutant who was seriously injured and was on the run, it would undoubtedly make his power even stronger. Not only him, but everyone at the scene thought of this. Everyone's eyes sparkled with greed for such power. In these end times, a person's strength was directly correlated to their power and equivalent to his or her level of significance. They have seen the power of Yuan Konga. An Epsilon-level mutant was a super powerful gap that completely crushes the lower-level mutants. Who doesn't want to become such an existence? At this time, Zhang Yi was not nearby. He was like a patient fisherman, hanging around Yuan Konga from a distance. In the ruins far away, Wei Dinghai took a look at his disabled arm, gritted his teeth, and made a decisive decision. Even if Tianhai City is in ruins, I will not be able to maintain my position after losing an arm. I might as well give it a try. His eyes were filled with ice blue color, and a storm was condensing in his pupils. The next moment, he merged into the vast white snow on the ground, then suddenly shot up across the sky with a massive leap. Subsequently, just as Yuan Konga was escaping, a huge vortex suddenly formed from the ground, and then quickly turned into a sharp spear and was directly aimed to stab her in the sky. Although Yuan Konga's vision was completely blurred and she almost lost the ability to see, her perception was still there. Facing this level of attack, she punched it with little effort. Then the giant spear, condensed from ice and snow, seemed to have hit an iron wall. An invisible force also quickly pressed down on it. And with a loud bang, the entire storm spear shattered into countless ice and snow fragments. Wei Dinghai's body was slammed deeply into the ground, and the frost armor wrapped around his body shattered like glass. Seconds after, a massive spear of ice and snow pierced his stomach as streams of blood spread out from the ground, dyeing the surrounding snow red. Wei Dinghai wanted to take advantage of Yuan Konga's serious injuries to launch a sneak attack and seize her origin, but he didn't expect that Yuan Konga was still powerful even in her current state. This scene also awakened the people watching the excitement around. Even the injured Yuan Konga was not something they could contend with. They were not Zhang Yi and did not have such a huge logistical supply, and they did not have the kind of space-based ability with sky-high defense. Yuan Konga could not deal with Zhang Yi, but killing the others was as easy as killing ants. With just one move, Yuan Konga killed Wei Dinghai in seconds and quickly fled into the distance. Zhang Yi chased her slowly. He glanced at the people in the distance lightly and smiled slightly. Everyone, Yuan Konga is seriously injured at this time. If you want to obtain her origin, please do so. Zhang Yi's tone was light, but in everyone's ears, there was a sense of playfulness. He seemed to be mocking Wei Dinghai's self-importance. Of course, although the others did not make a move, they all had such thoughts to some extent. Everyone was silent, knowing that they were not qualified to compete with Zhang Yi. It was obvious as day and night that an injured Epsilon was not something that ordinary mutants are qualified to think about. The next moment, Zhang Yi started a space jump to chase the direction where Yuan Konga escaped. He was not in a hurry at all because even if he caught up to her, he wouldn't be able to kill her, not yet at least. and Yuan Konga could not kill him given her current condition. But at the end of the day, they were all humans. They would get tired and would need to rest and eat. Yuan Konga was now sort of blind. In the state of not sleeping or eating, even if she was a powerful mutant, it was an impossible task. While Zhang Yi, on the other hand, had a lot of supplies on him. He even had military stimulants that could forcibly boost his spirits. At this point, he was competing with Yuan Konga in endurance. As both Zhang Yi and Yuan Konga disappeared from the battlefield, the others just subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief. Bailey Chongqing stared at the direction where Zhang Yi was going, and couldn't help saying, in the end, he turned out to be the biggest winner. If Zhang Yi really absorbed the essence of Yuan Konga, then he might even be promoted directly to the level of Epsilon. And with that power, Zhang Yi would also become the most powerful mutant in the entire Jiangnan region. At that time, they could only look up to his existence. Bailey Chongqing sighed slightly and continued. The captain originally said that he would let him join the team when the time comes. But now, if Zhang Yi really joins the team, I'm afraid he will be our leader. It's a pity for the captain. Perhaps he could have lived longer. A sad look flashed in Yi Jikong's eyes. Bian Junwu was their spiritual pillar, and his death was a huge blow to every team member. Hearing this, everyone fell into silence. Most of them had conflicted feelings, but they couldn't really blame Zhang Yi for Bian Junwu's death. It's a given that their captain might have lived a little longer if it weren't for Zhang Yi. But they also knew that the hidden injuries in his body had long been suppressed. Without Zhang Yi, he would have died soon anyway. However, dying on the battlefield and blooming the last glory before his death may not be a bad thing for him. Yi Jikong came over and said to Bailey Chongqing, "But why do I feel that everything was designed by him now? All of us have become his pawns and have been used by him." Bailey Chongqing placed a hand on Yi Jikong's shoulders and replied helplessly, "Used? There's nothing we can do about it. He is more skilled than us and have taken all of us into account." Bailey Chongqing was more open-minded about the situation. In his eyes, even if he was used by Zhang Yi, he wouldn't mind as long as the result was good and their original purpose was achieved. He was not jealous of Zhang Yi either, but a little thankful to him for everything he did. Because without Zhang Yi, they would not have discovered the secrets of the Snow Worship sect. And not only that, but would also fail to complete their mission, leaving a huge disaster for the entire Jiangnan region, no, even the entire country. On the other side, Yuan Konga was on the run. Unable to really outlast Zhang Yi, Yuan Konga urgently needed to find a place to recuperate. She has dozens of superpowers, including a variety of healing abilities, so she believes that if she gives herself enough time, she will be able to find a way to heal herself. However, behind her at a distance, there was a pair of eyes staring at her, not giving her any chance to breathe. And although Yuan Konga couldn't see Zhang Yi clearly, she knew he's been lurking around like a vulture, waiting for her death. Zhang Yi was not in a hurry at all, and his patience was outrageous. He has always maintained a proper distance, just watching Yuan Konga silently. Once Yuan Konga wants to stop and rest, he will use an origin bullet to force her to fight. If Yuan Konga becomes extremely angry and comes to him to fight, he will run away without looking back. And every time after such consumption, Yuan Konga's hidden injuries will erupt more seriously. In order to stay up all night, Zhang Yi injected himself with stimulants to improve his physical fitness, and also made his nerves excited. It didn't matter if he stayed up for 3 days and 3 nights. He could afford it. This grand hunt, if he waits till the end, he will get a huge reward. The next day, Yuan Konga instinctively found a department store buried deep in the snow. She made her way inside, and surprising enough, the food, although spoilt, was still pretty edible. Also, Yuan Konga had no choice in the matter anyway. However, just when she was about to grab some food to replenish her energy, a rocket was launched, accurately hitting the intended spot. With a loud boom, the deafening explosion destroyed the entire department store, burning all the supplies in the process. Yuan Konga had long been numb as she came out from the debris, but she was still a little broken in the face of this scene after being hungry for a day. She turned her head and looked into the distance with her gray eyes. Zhang Yi stood on a low hill, carrying a rocket launcher in his hand, staring in her location with a smile. A wisp of white smoke came out of the rocket launcher, and the smell was called despair. Yuan Konga's face was expressionless. She raised her right hand and countless golden beams shot out in quick succession, as if to destroy the entire mountain. But no matter how raging the attack was, it could not get close to Zhang Yi. After all, he had been invulnerable to all her methods. In front of him, 2 huge dimensional gates formed a giant sphere to protect him. "Are you still not giving up?" Zhang Yi asked lightly. "Everyone around you is dead. Your parents are dead, Zhang Yixin is dead, and even tens of thousands of followers of the Snow Worship sect were also killed by you. If you survive, will anyone still love you? You will be a lonely person. In fact, so many people died because of you. Don't you feel guilty? Don't you think you are the one who deserves to die the most? Yuan Konga listened to Zhang Yi's words silently, her face expressionless, without any answer. Staggering a little, she turned around and continued to flee in the wind and snow. Yuan Konga, who had lost her direction, was like a headless fly, running completely on instinct in her hazy state. Zhang Yi didn't care and chased slowly behind her. You can really run. Well, let's see how long you can hold on. On the third day, she came to the edge of Tianhai City. At this time, she was extremely weak, and her small face, the size of a palm, was whiter than snow. She hadn't eaten anything in 3 days. Every time she found something, it would be destroyed by Zhang Yi. She couldn't stop to rest, because she knew that Zhang Yi's gun was secretly pointed at her head. Despair. Incomparable despair. This feeling is like being cut by a very blunt knife. It will slowly pierce your skin first, and then cut your flesh and shave your bones bit by bit. If Yuan Konga met a stronger mutant than her and was killed directly by the other party, her fate might not be so pitiful. However, what she encountered was a dogskin plaster. This made her extremely unwilling and helpless. Zhang Yi, it would be great if you were still alive. Yuan Konga staggered to a snowy mountain and walked slowly up the mountain. Zhang Yi was just several meters behind her, slowly following her. Compared with Yuan Konga, his condition seemed very full. He had injected himself with 2 shots of stimulants, so his nerves were more active than usual. He had enough confidence to drag on until Yuan Konga couldn't stand it first. But looking at Yuan Konga's condition, he knew that he was not far from the final victory. Yuan Konga walked to the snowy mountain and felt the cold wind blowing across her cheeks. Although there was a hint of cold, it didn't make her feel uncomfortable. But she was too sleepy. Even the severe cold wind and snow couldn't stop her sleepiness. Countless times she couldn't even lift her eyelids. But every time she was about to fall asleep, a black bullet would attack from a distance and aim at her head. I'm so tired, but I shouldn't fall asleep. Yuan Konga murmured to herself as she shakes her head in a desperate attempt not to fall asleep. At this moment, she was desperate and pitiful, and her palm-sized face was full of grievances. It was as if she was a girl next door who was bullied and wanted to seek protection. God, am I not your most loyal believer? Please save me. Yuan Konga put her hands together and prayed to her God in her heart. But no voice responded to her. Why? Why doesn't God give me instructions? Did I do something wrong? But everything I did was to create a pure and unpolluted world. Zhang Yi, what should I do? Can you tell me? At this moment, Yuan Konga was no longer like the cold and holy leader of the Snow Worship sect, but just a helpless girl. In a trance, many faces appeared in front of her. Her parents smiled and stretched out their palms to her. Sweetheart, come with mom and dad. Let's go to heaven together. The next moment, Zhang Yi suddenly appeared at the scene and shouted seriously, No! You need to wake up. Wake up quickly. Seeing Zhang Yi again made Yuan Konga realize how lonely she'd been. She desperately rushed forward and hugged him tightly in a calm embrace. Yuan Konga suddenly thought to herself, maybe giving up isn't such a bad thing. After all the people I cherish are dead, and all the people who love me are dead because of me. What is the purpose of me living? I can see them. I can see them all when I die, right? A lullaby suddenly sounded in her ears. Yuan Konga could no longer hold on. She was sleepy and hungry, and her body had become an empty shell. The lullaby greatly calmed her shaking body. At this moment, Yuan Konga was on her knees, hugging the dead tree tightly in a calm embrace. Zhang Yi, I'm hungry. She chanted Zhang Yi's name a few more times and then slowly closed her eyes. It took less than a second for Yuan Konga to fall asleep. In the distance, Zhang Yi saw Yuan Konga fell asleep. He silently raised the gun in his hand, pointed at Yuan Konga and fired a shot. But the bullet stopped about a meter behind Yuan Konga's head and then fell onto the ground. Not dead yet? Zhang Yi said lightly. He stared at Yuan Konga cautiously, but did not dare to approach rashly. After all, an injured beast was the most dangerous. If Yuan Konga was really going to die, then her counterattack before death must be the most violent. He was not in a hurry at all, but the origin bullets in Zhang Yi's hand have been used up. So he took out an anti-material sniper rifle from his alternate space and aimed at Yuan Konga's body. He only aimed at the body, not the head, because this thing is too powerful. If it hits the head, it will definitely destroy it directly. That will affect his absorption of her origin. Yuan Konga had lost consciousness at this time, and her defense was completely based on instinct. Zhang Yi did not dare to get close, and he fired a shot from where he was. Yuan Konga, the current Epsilon-level mutant in Tianhai City, was finally exhausted by Zhang Yi. The large-caliber sniper bullet penetrated her body. No, to be exact, it tore her body apart. This scene looked a bit cruel. The young girl was torn in half. But facing such a powerful and terrifying mutant, Zhang Yi had to do this. There was no mercy on the battlefield. Even the dead had to be treated with caution. And such an ending was not inhumane to her, because she was the biggest black hand behind the zombie-tide turmoil in Tianhai City. Because of her, at least millions of people in Tianhai City died in the mouths of zombies. All this was the price she needed to pay for ignoring human life. Seeing the last scene, Zhang Yi finally confirmed that Yuan Konga was dead. His eyes were already bloodshot. He hadn't closed his eyes for 4 days and 3 nights. If he hadn't relied on drugs to support him, he would have fallen to the ground like Yuan Konga, or even worse than Yuan Konga. Zhang Yi stood up, suppressed his excitement, and slowly walked towards Yuan Konga. Again, a journey of 100 miles begins with a single step, and the last step to success is the farthest. He didn't want any accidents to happen. Zhang Yi carefully observed the surroundings and confirmed that no one was chasing him. Even if someone came, he was not afraid. Although his spirit was almost at its limit, his supernatural power was still abundant. No matter who came, his divine power could annihilate them. After the death of Bian Junwu and Yuan Konga, no one in the entire Tianhai City could be his opponent. Next, as long as he absorbed Yuan Konga's essence, he would become a more powerful and unparalleled mutant. I'm not very interested in how powerful I become, but if having power is the only way to protect myself and survive, I will pursue a stronger power. Zhang Yi walked step by step to Yuan Konga, and he was very careful throughout the whole process. The distance wasn't far, but it took some time to get to her corpse. When he arrived in front of the broken girl, her upper body was close to the dead tree. Zhang Yi took a deep breath and placed his right hand on Yuan Konga's head. The next moment, an indescribable huge force flowed into his whole body along his palm. It was like a rushing river roaring in his body. Zhang Yi opened his eyes, and his right eye burst into a dazzling golden light. Then, an immense burst of radiant energy lights up the surrounding space. After an unknown amount of time, Zhang Yi absorbed all of Yuan Konga's remaining abilities. He felt that his power had become even stronger. No matter from which level, it had been enhanced at an epic level. Even the simplest dimensional gate had a greatly enhanced threshold of defense. And his grasp of the power of space had also become more delicate, and it seemed that in the future, he could develop more powerful abilities. However, there was one thing Zhang Yi didn't know. As an Epsilon mutant who was promoted the day after tomorrow, Yuan Konga's abilities also had flaws. Because all of her abilities were plundered, she didn't really have her own power. In addition, she had just been promoted, and her origin had not yet been stabilized, and she had experienced a war, which caused her origin to be severely damaged. So to be precise, Zhang Yi only absorbed a small part of Yuan Konga's original power. But this part of the power alone was far beyond the power of any Delta-level mutant in Tianhai City. And next, what Zhang Yi had to do was to completely turn this power into his own. Zhang Yi sat in a lotus position and closed his eyes. He carefully felt the changes that this power brought to himself. He sat in the snowstorm and opened his eyes after a long time. Then he slowly opened his palm. A black and golden electric light condensed in his palm, which was like a flickering spark at first, and then quickly grew and turned into a dark substance that looked like flames and lightning. With a crackling sound, the distorted sound continued. Zhang Yi controlled this power, and soon it became solid in Zhang Yi's palm. Finally, it turned into a dark and unstable spear. Even Zhang Yi felt that he could not control this power. He quickly raised his hand and threw the spear into the distance. Accompanied with a swish sound, the black spear penetrated the void and fell on the mountainside in the distance, sinking into it silently. But the next moment, a dark substance burst out from that direction and turned into a huge black sphere, which was thousands of meters in radius. When the black sphere disappeared, it also left a huge circular hole on the mountainside of the short mountain. It was a huge round pit with a radius of hundreds of meters, and the surface was smooth, as if it had been directly wiped out by something. The power of the void, Zhang Yi murmured. When he got this power, he instinctively understood the function of this ability. It was a void that could devour everything, and it was an upgraded version of his divine power, with more terrifying lethality and more terrible power. Zhang Yi stared at his left hand in amazement. If I use the void that can devour everything with my double doors, is there anyone in this world that I can't kill? He even felt that this power could allow him to transcend the concept of human beings, and have the power to control the life and death of all things. When a person suddenly gains extremely powerful power, his heart will also expand infinitely. However, this complacency was quickly suppressed by Zhang Yi. There are too many strong people in this world. I can't be too self-righteous. Otherwise, complacency will lead me to destruction. Yuan Konga is the best example. Zhang Yi clenched his fists, his eyes full of confidence. Thinking of the terrifying power that Bian Junwu exploded before his death, and the scene of Yuan Konga manipulating dozens of superpowers and wantonly killing the mutants in Tianhai City, Zhang Yi felt that he had to calm down. The current world was still full of dangers, so he needed to be careful. With his current strength, even if he encounters a mutant who was more powerful than him, he could, at the very least, protect himself. Bian Junwu even mentioned that there are other mutants of the Epsilon level in the world. And one was in Shangjing district not far away that can even kill people thousands of miles away with a single thought. In addition, there's also the Jiangnan district. However, even if he faced a monster-level powerhouse like the Jiangnan district, he would not be afraid. And this wasn't due to his arrogance, but a strategic play from him. He knew that the Jiangnan district would definitely try its best to win him over when they learn of his current power. Subsequently, his involvement in Bian Junwu's death would naturally be overshadowed. Zhang Yi turned on the communicator and contacted Uncle Yu. This is Zhang Yi. Yuan Konga has been killed by me. We are safe now. On the other end, Uncle Yu, on the phone, sat on the sofa at the lounging room, surrounded by the rest of the family. He seemed to let out a long breath. Then, after a few seconds, replied, "That's good. That's really great. Where are you now? What's the situation with the forces in Tianhai City and the investigation team?" During the 4 days and 3 nights of pursuit, Zhang Yi focused all his energy on Yuan Konga and did not contact his family. But now everything has settled, but there were still some things to be done in Tianhai City. Uncle Yu continued in his usual tone, "We've returned to the shelter. And, except for Wei Dinghai who died, everyone else has returned to their respective bases. His deputy, Chun Jingguan, is still alive, so he took the remaining few people back to Morning Dew Base. In addition, the members of the investigation team went to Emerald Waterside Base. Their people were also seriously injured, especially Wu Di, who looked like he was about to die. They are recuperating there. At the moment, we are all waiting for you to come back home." With this update, Zhang Yi nodded and replied that he was on his way. They would talk about it some more when he gets there. Zhang Yi took out his car from his alternate space, turned on the automatic driving, and began his journey back to the shelter. It was obvious at this point that the other forces can no longer make much trouble. After the zombie saga and the battle with Yuan Konga, the entire Tianhai City was almost destroyed. Among the 5 major forces, except for them, the combat members of the other forces were almost dead, and only a few mutants remain. From now on, they will not pose any threat to him. His primary concern at present was the investigation team and the Jiangnan region. It took about an hour for Zhang Yi to return back to the shelter. Inside, everyone at home were waiting impatiently for him to enter. When he walked through the door, his most trusted bodyguard was the first to greet him. In this crisis in Tianhai City, they almost lost their homes and even their lives. In the end, it was Zhang Yi's strength that saved everything. Everyone's face was full of excitement as they rushed over, especially Zhou Qir and Yang Min. But as they closed in to hug Zhang Yi, he refused their hugs and cheers. Flower was the only exception, and the situation quickly turned awkward. Zhang Yi waved his hand and spoke with his eyes closed. "I want to rest now. Let's talk about everything after I wake up. Stimulants were like coffee. They can boost your spirits, but they will burst out fatigue all at once later." After returning home, Zhang Yi's mental strength has reached its limit. He walked past everyone and returned to his room. His room was still warm and gorgeous. The huge Hasten's bed was neatly covered with a white velvet quilt. The light was warm yellow, snowflakes were flying outside the window, and everything was so quiet and peaceful. Zhang Yi took off his clothes, locked the door with his backhand, and threw himself on the bed. Now, he just wanted to have a good sleep. Zhang Yi slept for 2 days. When he woke up, he still felt dizzy and his back and waist were sore. This was inevitable. After all, after such a long battle, his body was overdrawn to the extreme. He was not a strengthening person who was good at physical strength, so it was natural for him to be physically tired. Zhang Yi had changed into his usual set of home clothes as he opened his bedroom door. But at this moment, he had a satisfied smile on his face. Zhang Yi looked more relaxed and happy than ever before. The conspiracy of the Snow Worship sect was crushed. With his strength raised to an unprecedented level, he was also more confident than before. And although it may be worse than the amazing power shown by Yuan Konga, it has at least reached the level of Bian Junwu. There should be nothing in Tianhai City that can threaten him. But then Zhang Yi wondered, what is the standard of the Epsilon level, anyway? I am probably close to this level now, in terms of destructive power alone. As soon as Zhang Yi walked out and closed his door, he lowered his head and saw Flower squatting at the door, looking up at him. There were complicated emotions, worry and joy, coexisting in its eyes. It seemed that it was afraid that its master would not wake up. But it was no wonder, not only it, but everyone else in the shelter was also very worried about Zhang Yi's physical condition. After all, Zhang Yi left everyone this time to face a powerful opponent alone. And as soon as he came back, he headed straight to his room without saying a word, and hadn't come out for 2 days. He also locked himself in order to prevent anyone from disturbing him. Given a go-ahead, Flower quickly jumped into his arms and then purred into his arms. After confirming that Zhang Yi was safe and sound, Flower squinted its eyes and smiled sweetly. Zhang Yi stroked Flower's head and walked towards the lounging room slowly, step by step. In the lounging room, Zhou Qi, Yang Min, and Zhou Haimei were sitting on the sofa chatting. In their words, they mostly expressed regret for the current situation of Tianhai City and worry about Zhang Yi's health. The former was because after this battle in Tianhai City, most of the remaining survivors died again. The latter was easy to understand. The women were delighted when they saw him. Zhou Qi rushed over in worry. Zhang Yi, you finally woke up. You slept for 2 days and 2 nights in an instant, and we were scared to death. How are you now? Are you feeling unwell? Let me do a detailed physical examination for you. Zhou Qi tried to take Zhang Yi to the infirmary to examine him. With a warm smile, Zhang Yi said calmly that he's fine. He was incredibly tired before, but after his 2 days rest, he feels much better, although he's still a little tired. He sat down on the sofa, and while petting Flower, he asked them about the recent situation in Tianhai City. However, seeing their skeptical look made him reiterate that he was seriously fine. Very good, actually. Hearing the confident tone of Zhang Yi's voice made everyone feel relieved. Zhou Qi suggested Yang Xinxin report everything to him since she was better equipped to do so. As the network security consultant in the shelter, Yang Xinxin was responsible for monitoring the networks of other forces. So she knows the most about the intelligence of various forces in Tianhai City. But before that, Liang Yu, ever impatient, was curious and couldn't help asking, "Has Yuan Konga been killed by you?" Zhang Yi stared in her direction, thought for a while, and then shook his head slightly. Can't be considered that she was killed by me. She died of overdrawing her mental and physical strength. After that, the side effects of Bianjun was supernatural power broke out, and the 4-day and 3-night chase battle exhausted all of her energy. In despair, Yuan Konga died miserably. After confirming Yuan Konga's death from Zhang Yi's mouth, everyone nodded, and the two cousins could not help but sigh heavily with emotional relief when they suddenly realized it. If they had not heard it with their own ears, who could imagine that an extremely powerful being with abilities close to that of a god would eventually die from her own abilities? Also, the deeply hidden leader of the snow worship sect really killed too many people. There may be as many as 1 million survivors in Tianhai City who died because of her. Without her cultivation, there would be no such terrible thing as the corpse tide. At that time, Liang Yu felt extremely powerless. And whenever she thought of the battle that day, Yuan Konga hanging high in the air, raising her hand casually as the world was being torn apart. It was beyond her understanding of the capabilities of mutants. This was why she, at this very moment, was very determined to ask all the questions she needed answered. But how did you kill her? They knew that Zhang Yi was very powerful, but there was still a clear gap between Zhang Yi's power and that of a mutant of the Epsilon level like Yuan Konga. So there must be some secrets. Zhang Yi looked at everyone in the living room and explained slowly. Strictly speaking, it was not my ability that really killed her. It was her own ability. She absorbed the abilities of too many people, which included some side effects of those abilities. The more she swallowed, the more toxins she deposited. When her energy was stronger, the more violent the explosion of this ability toxin would be. That's why I was able to defeat her in the end, although he did not clearly and directly say it. It was implied that he planned everything himself and used Bian Junwa's ability to kill Yuan Konga. Then, her origin has also been absorbed by you, right? Liang Yu looked at Zhang Yi with a fiery gaze, and asked the question she wanted to ask the most. Yuan Konga died, but Zhang Yi was still alive, so it was natural for Zhang Yi to absorb Yuan Konga's power. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows, with a smile on his lips, and slowly raised his hand in the expectant eyes of everyone. That's true. I've indeed become a little stronger now. He indicated with his fingers, just a little bit. Zhang Yi didn't know what went wrong. When the others heard this, they suddenly realized it and looked at Zhang Yi expectantly. There was joy and excitement in their eyes. They all knew how powerful Yuan Konga was. So how powerful would Zhang Yi, who had swallowed Yuan Konga's origin, be at this time. Chunlei clenched his fist in amazement and loudly praised Zhang Yi on how powerful he might be. Brother Zhang Yi, you are super strong now, right? Yang Min was the first to ask, followed by Uncle Yu saying it was great news. With your power, aren't you invincible in the world? Let's see who dares to interfere with our lives in the future. After obtaining Yuan Konga's origin, he didn't become as powerful as Yuan Konga showed. Perhaps it was because she was promoted too quickly and her foundation was unstable. It may also be because her power was plundered, and with her death, the origin dissipated very quickly. Therefore, Zhang Yi only intercepted part of her origin. In addition, the transformation of power is inevitably consumed, and he can't become Epsilon who can destroy the world in one fell swoop. But that part of the origin has already greatly improved him. There was a jubilant mood in the shelter. Everyone felt that Zhang Yi had become stronger, and they were safer. But Zhang Yi still had a pressing matter that concerned him. And this matter was undoubtedly the investigation team sent by the Jiangnan district. They could more or less feel that Bian Junwu's death was related to him. And after the situation in Tianhai City was resolved this time, they would definitely report to the top leaders about him when they returned to Blizzard City. This was not good news for him. In the past, his strength was not very conspicuous, and Jiangnan district would not care much about him. But now that he'd killed Yuan Konga and obviously absorbed her essence, the Jiangnan district would not ignore an existence of this level. They would definitely send someone to recruit him. If he goes, he might be like Bian Junwu, dealing with crisis everywhere and walking on the edge of danger. If he doesn't go, well, it's a given that he would offend the Jiangnan district. If the senior officials of Jiangnan district were narrow-minded, they might even attack Zhang Yi with the idea of, if I can't use it, then no one should. Zhang Yi didn't dare to gamble on this possibility. Whether he is recruited by them or have to fight against them, everyone, including him, will definitely suffer. He had to control the situation by taking the initiative into his own hands as soon as possible. After thinking about it, he took out his communicator and decided to confront the investigation team. He would achieve his goal through them. So after Zhang Yi talked to everyone for a while, he abruptly got up and headed straight back to his room. This sudden action made everyone curious, so Chunlei asked what he was doing. I'm gonna change my clothes and then go talk to the investigation team about something. Zhang Yi replied casually as he made his way. Hearing this, Liang Yu quickly got up, saying she would also get ready right away. And almost immediately, Uncle Yu and Chunlei did the same with the same enthusiasm. But Zhang Yi calmly raised his hand to stop them. He wanted to handle this matter alone, so he told them that their assistance was not needed. They should take a good rest in the shelter. A while later, he got ready, drove out of the shelter alone and headed for Emerald Waterside Base. On his way, he contacted Xing Tian and Bailey Chongqing. Xing Tian naturally had no objections. Moreover, his attitude towards Zhang Yi on the communicator was particularly enthusiastic, even a little flattering. Zhang Yi was not surprised by this. The current Tianhai City, to put it bluntly, was Zhang Yi's territory. So the 5 major forces in the past are now only in name. The Snow Worship sect has been completely destroyed, and the combat effectiveness of the other 3 major bases was currently almost non-existent. Zhang Yi, who had outstanding strength, has become the undisputed king of Tianhai City. Even Bailey Chongqing was very gentle when talking to him. There was some meaning of winning over in his words, and even implicitly stated that the 2 sides could work together in the future. After all, we are all in the Jiangnan district, he said. And after reporting to Blizzard City, we would take a look here in the future. The captain's death also meant that we needed fresh blood. When Zhang Yi heard this, he raised the corner of his mouth coldly. Indeed, your captain died, so you should add a new captain. Bailey Chongqing's face changed slightly on the other end of the satellite phone, but he could only respond awkwardly. We'll talk when you come over. Agreeing to this, Zhang Yi hung up the phone in a cold tone. Bailey Chongqing frowned deeply, with a heavy look of worry on his face. The death of Bian Junwu caused the strength of their team to drop significantly. Originally, he hoped that Zhang Yi would join their team to make up for some of the strength. After all, Zhang Yi was a very smart person, and he was also strong enough in their recent battle in Tianhai City. In addition, he absorbed the essence of Yuan Konga. If he could join their team, they might be able to keep their status as an elite team. In Blizzard City, all living materials need to be divided according to contributions. Only by keeping the status of the elite team can the living materials of each of their team members be guaranteed. However, judging from Zhang Yi's tone during the call, he did not hide his ambition. If he came, he would want to be the captain of the investigation team. A newcomer who had just arrived and was thinking about the position of captain, and his ability was very strong, which naturally caused Bailey Chongqing's concern. After all, according to the order of the investigation team, after Bian Junwu's death, He was the most likely person to take over the position of captain. This kid, he is very ambitious. Bailey Chongqing sighed, and even hesitated in his heart whether to let Zhang Yi join their team. But if Zhang Yi doesn't join, how can Bian Junwu's loss be compensated? As a mutant at the peak level of Delta and close to the level of Epsilon, Bian Junwu was one of the top combat forces in Blizzard City. Naturally, Zhang Yi might be of this level or even higher, and such a person is the captain in other ace teams, which was not easy to find. After all, it was the captain's position. Bailey Chongqing was a little upset. He came to the room where his team members were. At this time, Wu Di had recuperated for a few days and his physical condition was much better, but his hair had been dyed silver and could not be restored to its original condition. The others were injured. They were hit by the aftermath of the battle. Bailey Chongqing walked into the room with a bad look on his face. Seeing this, everyone knew something was wrong, but Meng Xiu was the first to ask what was wrong. Bailey Chongqing thought about it and said what Zhang Yi implied, which was that if Bailey Chongqing wanted him to join their investigation team, he has to be the captain. I just spoke with Zhang Yi and he's on his way here. But what he meant was that if we wanted him to join our investigation team, he had to be the team leader. After Bailey Chongqing said this, he saw a complicated look on the faces of the team members. Some were angry, specifically Wu Di, and angrily accused Zhang Yi of being ambitious. Some were silent, as if they thought Zhang Yi was qualified to compete for the captain's position. After all, everyone knew that he had devoured Yuan Konga's essence, so who knows how strong he is now. Bailey Chongqing spread his hands, looking reasonable. In my opinion, he is right to want to move up, and he was the biggest contributor to Tianhai City's action this time. If he wants to be the captain, I don't think there will be much problem in terms of strength. However, after all, he has no experience of cooperating with us. If he joins our team, it will take time to get used to each other. Being a captain is not just about strength. He cited Bian Junwu as an example. Our captain used to convince us in both ability and personality. But this Zhang Yi, we still know too little about him. When Bailey Chongqing finished speaking, Wu Di's patience was at its limit, so he couldn't help but shout on top of his lungs. Who the fuck does Zhang Yi thinks he is? Even if he wants to join our team, why should a newcomer be the captain as soon as he arrives? If he comes, I won't stay. With a frown, Kong Sheng also crossed his arms and said calmly, "Did he tell you that? He's too arrogant." Qi Guangming also directly added, "Everyone present knows the only person who is qualified to take over the captain's position is Uncle Bailey. No matter how good Zhang Yi is, he has to abide by the rules when he comes." Yi Jikong frowned but said nothing. Meng Xiu looked at everyone in the room and did not express any opinion. They knew that Bailey Chongqing must want to take over the position of captain, and they didn't have much objection to this. After all, he had always been the deputy captain in the team, and his strength and character were worthy of everyone's respect. So naturally, they thought that Zhang Yi can join the team to supplement the combat power. Bailey Chongqing smiled and waved his hand. Who will be the captain is still up to the top management. It doesn't matter whether I am the captain or not. What matters is that the team can have better development in the future. However, Zhang Yi will come over to talk to us later. I think we should first see what his attitude is